The crystal chandelier in Halberg International's marble lobby caught the morning light as CEO Jonathan Kellerman strode past his usual route until 9 languages flowing from a janitor's lips stopped him dead in his tracks. In 30 seconds, Denise Atwater shattered every assumption about talent worth and the invisible brilliance walking among us. This is the story that stunned an entire corporation and proved that genius doesn't wear a suit. If you're watching from New York, London, or anywhere in between, drop your city in the comments. Let's see how far this incredible story travels. The morning of September 15th started like any other at Halberg International's towering headquarters in downtown Manhattan. The 42-story glass monument to corporate success hummed with its usual symphony of ringing phones, clicking heels, and whispered negotiations worth millions. But in the shadow of all that gleaming ambition, Denise Atwater pushed her cleaning cart through the marble lobby at 6:47 a.m., invisible as always. For 13 years, she'd been a ghost in these halls. The kind of person executives passed without seeing their eyes, sliding over her navy blue uniform, as if she were part of the architecture. At 51, Denise had perfected the art of being unseen. Her graying hair pulled back in a tight bun, her weathered hands gripping the mop handle, she moved through the building like a whisper there, but not there, essential but ignored. That morning, however, would be different. Jonathan Kellerman, the company's 45-year-old CEO, had arrived earlier than usual. The Beijing merger had kept him up most of the night, and he'd decided to beat the morning traffic rather than toss and turn in his penthouse bed. His Italian leather shoes clicked against the marble as he crossed the lobby, his mind already racing through the day's agenda. The Japanese delegation at 10. The quarterly review at 2. The board's concerns about international expansion at 4. He was halfway to the executive elevator when he heard it. Shide, 我理解您的单文件，将在今天下午准备好. The Mandarin words floated across the lobby, spoken with the fluid precision of a native speaker. Jonathan stopped his hand frozen on his phone. He turned, expecting to see one of his international liaisons on an early morning call. Instead, he saw Denise Atwater speaking into her phone while she mopped. No se preocupe, señora Garcia. Le expliqué a su hijo que el pago se procesará mañana. She switched to Spanish without missing a beat, her mop never stopping its rhythmic sweep across the floor. Jonathan took a step closer, his polished shoes silent on the marble. The merger documents in his briefcase suddenly felt less urgent. Oui, je comprends parfaitement. Je lui dirai quand je la verrai cet après-midi. French now as smooth as silk. The CEO of one of America's largest international consulting firms stood frozen in his own lobby, watching a janitor conduct a linguistic symphony. His Harvard MBA, his 15 years climbing the corporate ladder, his corner office with its panoramic view of Manhattan, none of it had prepared him for this moment. Denise ended her call and looked up, finally noticing him. For a second, their eyes met his wide with shock, hers suddenly guarded with the wariness of someone who'd learned that being noticed rarely meant anything good. "Good morning, Mr. Kellerman," she said in perfect English, her voice carefully neutral. She gripped her mop tighter already, preparing to apologize for whatever infraction he'd observed. "You speak Mandarin." He said the words coming out more like an accusation than he'd intended. Yes, sir." She shifted uncomfortably. "I was helping a friend translate some documents. I'm sorry if I was too loud." "And Spanish, and French." The lobby seemed to shrink around them. Somewhere in the distance, the early morning traffic hummed against the windows, but Jonathan heard nothing except the thundering realization that he'd walked past this woman hundreds of times without knowing she possessed skills his company paid consultants 6 figures to provide. "How many languages do you speak?" His voice had dropped to barely above a whisper. Denise's fingers twisted around the mop handle. In 13 years, no executive had asked her anything beyond whether the conference room was clean. Now the CEO himself stood 3 feet away, looking at her like she'd just revealed she could fly. 9, she said quietly. "I speak 9 languages fluently." The word hung in the air between them like a challenge to everything Jonathan thought he knew about his own company. 9 languages. His senior translation team collectively spoke 7. His head of international relations with her Princeton degree and diplomatic background spoke 4. Which ones? He moved closer, his merger forgotten, his morning schedule evaporating. English, Spanish, French, Mandarin, Japanese, Arabic, Russian, Portuguese, and German. She listed them like items on a grocery list, each one another blow to Jonathan's understanding of the world. The elevator dinged behind them. Sarah Mitchell, head of human resources, stepped out, her heels clicking purposefully until she saw her CEO standing with the janitor. She stopped, her perfectly sculpted eyebrows rising. "Jonathan, is everything all right?" He didn't turn around. "Sarah, did you know Ms.?" He paused, realizing he didn't even know her last name after 13 years. "Atwater," Denise supplied softly. "Did you know Ms. Atwater speaks 9 languages?" Sarah's laugh was light dismissive. "I'm sure that's useful for cleaning international offices." She shot Denise a look that said, "Know your place. Jonathan, the Beijing team is waiting for your call." But Jonathan Kellerman, who'd built his reputation on recognizing opportunity where others saw obstacles, wasn't moving. His mind was already racing through the implications. The mistakes in the Tokyo contract that had cost them $3 million, mistakes a native Japanese speaker would have caught. The cultural misunderstanding with the Moscow clients that had nearly torpedoed a deal worth $50 million. The Arabic presentation that had offended the Saudi investors because of a single mistranslated phrase. All of it could have been prevented by the woman now standing before him in a janitor's uniform, clutching a mop like a shield. "Cancel my morning meetings," he said, still not looking at Sarah. "I'm sorry, what?" Sarah's voice pitched higher. "Jonathan, the Japanese delegation will wait." He finally turned to face his head of HR, and something in his expression made her take a step back. "I need you to pull Ms. Atwater's employment file. Everything. Employment history, background checks, performance reviews. Everything." Denise's knuckles had gone white around the mop handle. "Mr. Kellerman, if I've done something wrong—" "You haven't done anything wrong." He turned back to her, and for the first time in 13 years, really looked at her. Not through her, not past her, but at her. The lines around her eyes that spoke of hard years. The calluses on her hands that told of manual labor. The slight stoop to her shoulders that came from years of being overlooked. "You've done everything right." He continued, his voice soft with something that might have been shame. "We're the ones who've done something wrong." Sarah's phone buzzed urgently. "Jonathan, Tokyo is calling. They're threatening to pull out if we don't. Tell them I'll call them back in an hour." "An hour, Jonathan, we could lose the entire—" "Ms. Atwater," he interrupted, addressing Denise directly. "How's your Japanese?" Denise blinked. "My Japanese?" "Yes. Specifically your understanding of business terminology, contract language." I studied international business linguistics before." She trailed off, old pain flickering across her face. Before life happened," she said quietly. The lobby had begun to fill with early morning arrivals. Executives in $1,000 suits, streaming past assistants clutching coffee and tablets, the constant flow of corporate importance. And in the middle of it all stood Jonathan Kellerman, CEO of a Fortune 500 company, having the most important conversation of his week with a janitor. Marcus Webb from accounting walked by, did a double take, and nearly walked into a potted plant. "Mr. Kellerman." Sarah tried again, desperation creeping into her voice. "People are starting to notice." "Good," Jonathan said. "Maybe it's time they did." He reached into his briefcase and pulled out a folder, the Tokyo contract that had been haunting him for 3 days. 50 pages of dense legal Japanese that his translation team had been struggling with. He held it out to Denise. "Page 37, section 4, paragraph 2. Can you read it?" Denise set down her mop the first time in 13 years she'd stopped working while on the clock. She took the folder with trembling hands, flipped to the specified page, and began to read in flawless Japanese. But after 3 sentences, she stopped, her face paling. "This is wrong," she whispered. "What's wrong?" "This clause. It doesn't say what your translation says. It's—" She read further, her eyes widening. "Mr. Kellerman, this gives them full intellectual property rights to everything developed under the partnership. Not partial rights, full rights. And the penalty clause, it's not 50 million yen. It's 50 billion. The folder slipped from Jonathan's suddenly numb fingers. 50 billion yen. $800 million. They'd been about to sign away $800 million and their entire patent portfolio because of a translation error. "You're certain?" His voice came out strangled. "Absolutely certain. The kanji here—" She pointed to a character. "It's been misread. It changes everything." Sarah's phone hadn't stopped buzzing. The lobby was filling with curious onlookers. Someone was definitely taking a video, and Jonathan Kellerman, for the first time in his professional career, didn't care about any of it. "Ms. Atwater," he said slowly, each word deliberate. "I need you to come to my office, right now." "But my shift—" "Your shift just changed. Sarah, call maintenance. Tell them Ms. Atwater has been reassigned, effective immediately." "Reassigned to what?" Sarah's voice had gone sharp. Jonathan picked up the Tokyo contract from the floor, holding it like evidence in a crime. "To saving this company $800 million. He started toward the executive elevator, then stopped when he realized Denise hadn't moved. She stood frozen by her mop bucket, looking like someone had just told her the laws of physics had been reversed. "Ms. Atwater, I'm not allowed in the executive elevator," she said, 13 years of conditioning holding her in place. Jonathan walked back to her, past the gathering crowd of gawking employees, past Sarah's horrified expression, past every corporate protocol that governed the rigid hierarchy of Halberg International. "You are now," he said simply. The elevator doors opened with a soft chime. Jonathan stepped inside, then turned to wait. The entire lobby had gone silent. Dozens of employees watching as Denise Atwater, janitor woman who'd cleaned their offices and emptied their trash for over a decade, took her first hesitant step toward the executive elevator. Her orthopedic shoes, practical ugly things designed for 12-hour shifts on hard floors, squeaked against the marble. The sound echoed through the silent lobby like an announcement that the world was shifting. She made it 3 steps before Carlos Rodriguez, the night security guard who'd worked the same shifts as Denise for 8 years, started clapping. Slow, deliberate applause that rang through the marble space. Maria from the cafeteria joined in. Then Tom from mail services. By the time Denise reached the elevator, half the service staff was applauding, while the executives stood frozen in bewilderment. The elevator doors started to close. Sarah Mitchell lunged forward. "Jonathan, this is insane! You can't just—" He pressed the close button, cutting her off. As the elevator began to rise, he turned to Denise, who was pressed against the back wall like she expected to be thrown out at any moment. "I'm about to ask you to do something that might seem impossible," he said. "More impossible than this." She gestured at the elevator at him, at the whole surreal situation. "I need you to translate for the Japanese delegation in 3 hours." The elevator hummed softly as it climbed. Denise's reflection in the polished steel doors showed a woman in a janitor's uniform, but Jonathan was already seeing something else. He was seeing the person who might have just saved his company from the worst deal in its history. "Mr. Kellerman," Denise said quietly, "I haven't done professional translation in 20 years. But you can do it." She was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice carried a strength he hadn't heard before. "I can do it better than anyone you've ever hired." The elevator dinged at the executive floor. The doors opened to reveal the hushed sanctuary of corporate power, thick carpets, wood-paneled walls, assistants who spoke in whispers. Jonathan's personal assistant, Margaret, looked up from her desk, and nearly dropped her coffee when she saw who was with him. "Margaret, I need you to clear my morning. Everything." "Sir, the Beijing call." "Can wait. I also need you to go to Bergdorf's. Buy a suit. Size." He looked at Denise questioningly. 12 wool. She said, her voice barely audible. "Size 12. Something appropriate for meeting international clients. Shoes, too. Size 8. Margaret's fingers had frozen over her keyboard. "Mr. Kellerman, I don't understand." "You don't need to understand. You need to go shopping. Now, have everything back here in 2 hours. As Margaret grabbed her purse and fled, shooting bewildered looks over her shoulder, Jonathan led Denise into his office. The corner suite was bigger than her entire apartment, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a view of Manhattan that looked like a postcard. She stopped just inside the door, afraid to walk on the pristine white carpet in her work shoes. "Sit," Jonathan said, gesturing to one of the leather chairs facing his desk. "I'll get it dirty. Then we'll clean it. Sit." She perched on the edge of the chair like she might need to run at any moment. Jonathan pulled up the Tokyo contracts on his computer, projecting them onto the wall-mounted screen. "Show me everything that's wrong." For the next hour, Denise Atwater, minimum-wage janitor, took apart $3 million worth of translation work with the precision of a surgeon. Every error, every nuance, every place where a misunderstood cultural context had changed the meaning, she found them all. Here, she pointed to a section. They translated kyoryoku as cooperation, but in this context it means mandatory compliance. Your team agreed to mandatory compliance with all their future development standards. That could cost you billions in retrofitting. Jonathan's phone hadn't stopped buzzing. He could see Sarah's name flashing repeatedly, along with several board members. The news was spreading through the building like wildfire. He ignored them all. "How?" he asked finally. "How does someone who speaks 9 languages end up pushing a mop?" Denise finished for him. For the first time since they'd entered his office, she smiled a sad, knowing expression. "Life doesn't always care about your qualifications, Mr. Kellerman. Tell me." She was quiet for so long, he thought she wouldn't answer. When she finally spoke, her voice carried the weight of old grief. "I was 28 when my husband died. Car accident. Left me with 2 kids and medical bills that ate through our savings in 6 months. I was finishing my doctorate in linguistic studies at Columbia, but dissertation defenses don't pay rent. I took a night job cleaning offices. Told myself it was temporary." She looked out at the Manhattan skyline, at all that success glittering in the morning sun. "Then my daughter got sick. Leukemia. The treatments cost everything. I dropped out of Columbia, took a second job, then a third. By the time she was better, thank God she got better, 5 years had passed. No one wants to hire a linguistics expert who's been out of the field for 5 years. But Halberg needed janitors, and janitors get health insurance." Jonathan felt something twist in his chest. His company, his successful, forward-thinking, opportunity-creating company, had had a polyglot genius cleaning their toilets for 13 years because they offered health insurance. "Your daughter, she's okay now." "She's a doctor," Denise said with quiet pride. "Johns Hopkins. My son's an engineer at Boeing. They don't know—" She stopped, swallowed. "They don't know I'm still doing this. They think I work in administration." Before Jonathan could respond, the door burst open. Sarah Mitchell stood there, flanked by 2 board members, Eleanor Craig and James Whitfield. Eleanor's face was set in lines of rigid disapproval that had terrorized junior executives for 3 decades. "Jonathan!" Eleanor's voice could have frozen helium. "Would you care to explain why the entire building is in an uproar over you promoting a janitor?" "I haven't promoted anyone. Yet." "Yet." James Whitfield stepped forward. "Jonathan, be reasonable. We have protocols, procedures. You can't just pull someone off the cleaning staff and what discover they could have saved us from a $800 million mistake." Jonathan turned his computer screen toward them. "Ms. Atwater found critical errors in the Tokyo contract. Errors our $40,000 a month translation team missed. Eleanor's expression didn't change. That's hardly... She speaks 9 languages fluently. She has expertise in international business linguistics. And for 13 years, she's been mopping our floors because no one bothered to ask what else she could do. She's a janitor, Eleanor said flatly, as if that ended all discussion. She's an employee, Jonathan corrected. An employee with skills we desperately need. The room went quiet except for the constant buzzing of phones. Denise sat frozen in her chair, looking like she wanted to disappear into the leather. The Japanese delegation will be here in 2 hours, Jonathan continued. We can either meet them with our current translation team, the one that nearly cost us $800 million, or we can have Ms. Atwater handle it. This is ridiculous, Eleanor snapped. She's not qualified. I'm more qualified than anyone on your current team. Everyone turned to look at Denise. She'd stood up, her hands clenched at her sides, her chin raised despite the tremor in her voice. I have a master's degree from Columbia in linguistic studies with a specialization in Asian languages. I've studied under Professor Yamamoto at Tokyo University. I've translated for the UN back when... She paused, steadied herself. Back when my life was different. So yes, Ms. Craig, I'm qualified. The only thing I'm not qualified for, apparently, is being noticed. The silence that followed could have been measured in heartbeats. Eleanor Craig, who'd reduced grown executives to tears, took a step back. Margaret chose that moment to return armed with shopping bags from Bergdorf's. I got several options, she said breathlessly, then froze as she registered the tension in the room. Jonathan stood. Ms. Atwater needs to prepare for the delegation. I suggest we all let her do that. This isn't over, Eleanor said coldly. The board will hear about this. I'm counting on it, Jonathan replied. After they left, Denise sank back into the chair. I can't do this. You just did. I stood up to one board member. You're asking me to pretend to be something I'm not in front of international clients. Jonathan moved around his desk, sitting in the chair beside her, instead of behind his fortress of wood and authority. I'm not asking you to pretend anything. I'm asking you to be who you really are, for the first time in 13 years. Margaret cleared her throat. Should I show Ms. Atwater to the executive changing room? Yes, and Margaret, call down to HR. I want every employee file on service staff, all of them. As Denise followed Margaret out, clutching the Bergdorf's bags like a lifeline, she turned back. Mr. Kellerman. Why are you doing this? He thought of all the corporate speak he could offer, maximizing human resources, leveraging hidden assets, innovative talent acquisition. Instead, he told her the truth. Because talent shouldn't need a dress code, and because I'm tired of walking past brilliance without seeing it. The door closed behind her. Jonathan stood at his window, looking down at the city below. Somewhere in those towers, in those thousands of offices, how many other Denise Atwaters were pushing mops and emptying trash, their gifts invisible to everyone who mattered. His phone rang. The Tokyo team. He let it go to voicemail. 90 minutes later, Denise Atwater walked back into his office, and Jonathan Kellerman forgot how to breathe. The navy blue suit fit her perfectly, transforming her from invisible to undeniable. But it wasn't the clothes, it was the way she carried herself. The woman who'd hunched over a mop that morning now stood straight, her shoulders back, her chin raised. She looked like what she'd always been underneath a professional who spoke 9 languages and could save his company millions. How do I look? She asked, nervousness creeping back into her voice. Like the person who's about to impress the hell out of Tokyo. The conference room had been prepared with meticulous care. The Japanese delegation would arrive expecting the usual team: Richard Brennan, with his Harvard MBA, and broken Japanese Lisa Chen, who spoke Mandarin, but fumbled with Japanese honorifics, and the array of assistants who nodded knowingly while understanding perhaps half of what was being said. Instead, they would find Denise Atwater. The delegation arrived precisely at 10. Mr. Takashi Yamamoto, lead negotiator, entered with the careful dignity of someone who'd been insulted by American attempts at his language too many times. His team followed 5 executives in identical black suits, their faces carefully neutral. Jonathan made the introductions in English, then gestured to Denise. "This is Ms. Atwater, our senior linguistics specialist. She'll be handling the translation today." The moment Denise spoke her first words in Japanese, the room changed. Takashi's eyes widened slightly, the equivalent of a gasp from the usually stoic executive. She hadn't just spoken Japanese. She'd used the exact level of formal language appropriate for their respective positions, acknowledged their company's recent success, with a cultural reference only someone deeply familiar with Japanese business would know, and somehow managed to convey both respect and confidence in a single sentence. For the next 3 hours, Denise Atwater didn't just translate, she performed a linguistic ballet. When Takashi made a joke that relied on a Japanese pun, she laughed at exactly the right moment, then seamlessly created an English equivalent that made Jonathan chuckle. When tensions rose over a particularly thorny clause, she found a way to phrase both sides' concerns that honored the Japanese need for harmony while protecting American interests. But the moment that would be talked about in Halberg International for years to come happened when Takashi mentioned almost offhandedly a classical Japanese poem. It was a test, the kind of cultural gatekeeping that had tripped up every previous translator. Denise not only recognized the poem, but quoted the next line, then gently connected its theme to the business matter at hand. Takashi actually smiled, a full, genuine smile that his own team seemed shocked to witness. During a break, Jonathan overheard Takashi speaking to his senior advisor in rapid Japanese, assuming no one would understand. "This woman is extraordinary. Why has Kellerman been hiding her?" The advisor responded, "Perhaps he just found her himself." Denise, pouring tea nearby, gave no indication she'd heard. But Jonathan saw the tiny smile playing at her lips. By the time the delegation left, they'd not only agreed to better terms than Jonathan had hoped for, but had specifically requested that Ms. Atwater handle all future negotiations. Takashi had actually bowed to her, not the perfunctory bob he'd given Jonathan, but a deep, respectful bow that acknowledged her as an equal. As the elevator doors closed on the Japanese delegation, Richard Brennan, the head of translations, who'd just watched his entire department be outperformed by a janitor, finally spoke. "Who the hell are you?" Denise turned to him, and for the first time in 13 years, didn't apologize for existing in a space where others thought she didn't belong. "I'm the woman who just saved this company $60 million in better terms. And I'm the same woman who cleaned your office last night. The only thing that changed was that someone finally bothered to ask what else I could do." Richard's face went through several colors before settling on a mottled purple. "This is insane. You can't just—" "Actually," Jonathan interrupted, "she can. Denise, I'd like to offer you a position, Senior Director of International Relations." The words hung in the air like an explosion waiting to happen. Margaret dropped her tablet. Someone in the hallway gasped, and Richard Brennan looked like he might need medical attention. That's a executive position." Sarah Mitchell had appeared, drawn by the commotion. "It requires board approval. You can't just—" "I can make the offer. The board can confirm it." Jonathan turned to Denise. "The salary would be $300,000 to start, with full benefits and stock options." Denise's legs gave out. She sat down hard on the nearest chair, her hand over her mouth. 300,000. She'd been making 32,000 cleaning offices. I need to think." "Of course. Take all the time you—" "No." She stood up, steadying herself. "I need 5 minutes. Just 5 minutes to—" She gestured vaguely at everything, the suit, the office, the impossible reality of it all. She walked to the ladies' room, the executive ladies' room she'd cleaned hundreds of times but had never been allowed to use. In the mirror, a stranger looked back. Professional. Accomplished. Visible. She thought of her daughter lying in a hospital bed at 7 years old, bald from chemo, asking why mommy had to leave for work again. She thought of her son offering to drop out of high school to help with bills. She thought of every night she'd come home, her back aching, her hands raw from industrial cleaners, and studied languages on YouTube because she couldn't afford to let her mind die just because her dreams had. A knock on the door interrupted her thoughts. "Ms. Atwater." It was Margaret. "Mr. Kellerman wanted me to check if you're all right." Denise opened the door. "I'll take it." "The position." "Yes." Margaret smiled, the first genuine smile she'd given Denise in 13 years of passing each other in the halls. "I'll prepare the paperwork." When Denise returned to the conference room, a crowd had gathered. Word had spread through the building like wildfire. The janitor who spoke 9 languages, the CEO who'd stopped a merger to listen to her, the Japanese delegation who'd bowed to her like she was royalty. Eleanor Craig stood at the front of the crowd, her face carved from stone. "This is highly irregular, Jonathan." "Yes," he agreed. "It is. She has no executive experience. Neither did half our board when they started. She's been a janitor for 13 years. And she's been a genius for 51. The crowd murmured. Phones were definitely recording. Someone from IT was live streaming on the company's Slack. Eleanor turned to Denise. "Do you really think you can just walk into an executive position? Do you have any idea what it takes to succeed at this level?" Denise met her gaze steadily. "With all due respect, Ms. Craig, I've been succeeding at this level my entire life. I've just been doing it while invisible. I've listened to your meetings while cleaning your conference rooms. I've heard your strategies, your mistakes, your successes. I've watched this company nearly lose deals because of cultural misunderstandings that I could have prevented if anyone had asked my opinion." She took a step forward, and Eleanor actually stepped back. "I know that the Henderson deal fell through because someone used the wrong form of address for the Saudi prince. I know we lost the Beijing account because the presentation colors were funeral white instead of prosperity red. I know that right now we have contracts in 7 languages sitting in legal that are probably full of errors that will cost us millions." The crowd had gone silent. Even the phones had lowered. "So yes, Ms. Craig, I think I can handle an executive position. The question is whether this company can handle having someone like me in it." "Someone like you." Eleanor's voice had gone dangerously quiet. "Someone who knows what it's like to be invisible. Someone who understands that the person serving your coffee might speak 4 languages, that your security guard might have a degree in engineering, that your janitor might save your company from an $800 million mistake." She looked around the room, making eye contact with the service staff scattered throughout Carlos, the security guard Maria from the cafeteria, Tom from mail services, all watching with desperate hope. Someone who knows that talent doesn't always come in a suit. Jonathan Kellerman watched his company's rigid hierarchy crack in real time. Some executives were nodding. Others looked horrified. The service staff looked like they were witnessing a miracle. Eleanor Craig drew herself up for what would surely be a devastating response, but Takashi Yamamoto's voice cut through the tension. He'd returned having forgotten his briefcase and had clearly heard everything. "Forgive the intrusion," he said in accented English, then looked directly at Eleanor. "But if this company does not value Ms. Atwater properly, we would be honored to offer her a position with our firm. Someone who understands language, culture, and respect would be invaluable to our international expansion." The room exploded. A competitor was trying to poach their newly discovered genius who was technically still on janitorial staff. Sarah Mitchell looked like she might faint. Eleanor Craig's face had gone white. And Jonathan Kellerman started laughing. "Mr. Yamamoto," he said, still chuckling. "I appreciate the offer, but Ms. Atwater has already accepted a position as our Senior Director of International Relations." "Has the board approved this?" Eleanor demanded. "They will," Jonathan said with complete confidence. "Unless they want to explain to shareholders why we let a polyglot genius who just saved us $60 million walk over to our competitors." Takashi bowed again to Denise. "The offer stands, should you ever reconsider." He retrieved his briefcase and left, but not before adding in perfect English, "It would be refreshing to work with someone who truly understands that respect translates into every language." The implications hung in the air. Halberg had just been publicly shamed by a client for their treatment of an employee. "I need to make some calls," Eleanor said, stiffly retreating with what remained of her dignity. The crowd began to disperse, but the energy had shifted. Executives were looking at service staff differently. Conversations were starting hesitant, awkward, but starting. Carlos approached Denise. "You really did it?" he said in Spanish. "Not yet," she replied in the same language. "But it's a beginning." As the room cleared, Jonathan found himself alone with Denise. She'd sat down again, the adrenaline clearly wearing off. "You know this is just the start," he said. "Eleanor won't give up easily. The board will push back. Some of the executives will resent you." "I've been invisible for 13 years, Denise replied. "I think I can handle being resented." "Why didn't you ever say anything? In 13 years, why didn't you tell someone what you could do?" She looked out the window at the city below. "Have you ever tried to tell someone you're drowning when they can't even see you're in the water?" The question hit him like a physical blow. How many times had he walked past her, hundreds, thousands, and never once had he seen her as anything more than furniture that moved? "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "Don't be sorry. Be better." "What do you mean?" "I'm not the only one, Mr. Kellerman. This building is full of invisible people with invisible talents. The question is, are you going to keep walking past them, or are you going to start seeing them?" Before he could answer, Margaret appeared in the doorway. "Mr. Kellerman, the board is calling an emergency meeting. They want to discuss the Atwater situation." "The Atwater situation?" Denise repeated with a bitter laugh. "I've become a situation." "No," Jonathan corrected. "You've become a revolution." The boardroom at Halberg International had hosted decisions worth billions, mergers that reshaped industry strategies that influenced global markets. But it had never hosted a meeting quite like this one. The 12 board members sat around the polished mahogany table like judges at a tribunal. Eleanor Craig had claimed the seat directly opposite Jonathan, her allies flanked on either side. The air crackled with tension that expensive air conditioning couldn't dissipate. "This is unprecedented." Board Chairman William Foster began, his voice carrying the weight of 40 years in business. "In the company's entire history, we have never promoted someone directly from janitorial to executive staff." "Then it's time we started," Jonathan replied evenly. "She has no executive experience," Eleanor stated for what felt like the 100th time. "She has 13 years of experience in this company, cleaning it, and apparently saving it from near-catastrophic translation errors while she did." Richard Brennan had been called in to testify. His face was still mottled with indignation. "This undermines our entire translation department. We have protocols, standards, certifications. And yet you missed $800 million worth of errors that Ms. Atwater caught in an hour," Jonathan interrupted. "She could have been guessing. One lucky catch doesn't make her qualified." "Should I bring in Mr. Yamamoto to testify about her qualifications? I'm sure he'd be happy to explain again how impressed he was, right before he offers her a job with our competitors." That silenced Richard. Eleanor leaned forward. "Jonathan, be reasonable. We can hire her as a translator, give her a position in Richard's department. But senior director? That's insanity." "No," a new voice said from the doorway. "Insanity is having a genius clean your toilets for 13 years." Everyone turned. Denise stood in the doorway, still in her Bergdorf suit, but somehow looking more powerful than she had an hour ago. Behind her stood someone unexpected, Michael Chen, the company's largest individual shareholder. "Michael," William Foster stood. "What are you doing here?" "I was in the building for another meeting when I heard about this situation." He moved into the room, his presence commanding attention. "I've just spent the last 30 minutes reviewing Ms. Atwater's discovery in the Tokyo contracts. Do you all understand what she found? Translation errors, Eleanor began. No, she found systematic fraud. The room went silent. Michael continued. The errors weren't random. They followed a pattern. Someone, and I'll let legal figure out who has been deliberately mistranslating contracts to benefit our partners at our expense. Ms. Atwater didn't just save us from one bad deal. She exposed a conspiracy that could have cost us billions. Eleanor's face had gone gray. That's a serious accusation. It's not an accusation, it's a fact. I've had 3 independent translators review her findings. They all confirmed it. The question is, how many other contracts have been sabotaged? And who else in this company has the linguistic capability to find out? All eyes turned to Denise. How many languages do your contracts cover? She asked quietly. 12. William Foster replied. I speak 9 of them. Give me a week and access to your contract database, and I'll audit every international deal you've made in the last 5 years. That's thousands of documents, Richard protested. Yes, Denise agreed. It is. Michael Chen smiled. I motion to approve Ms. Atwater's appointment as Senior Director of International Relations effective immediately, with the additional responsibility of conducting a full audit of all international contracts. Seconded, said Jennifer Walsh, a board member who'd been silent until now. This is happening too fast, Eleanor protested. Or 13 years too slow, Jennifer countered. She looked at Denise. I have a daughter at Johns Hopkins, pre-med. She might know your daughter. Amelia Atwater, Denise said softly. She's in her residency now, pediatric oncology. She's brilliant, Jennifer said. Just like her mother, apparently. The vote was called. 7 in favor, 4 against 1 abstention. Eleanor Craig looked like she'd swallowed something bitter. The motion passes, William Foster announced. Congratulations, Director Atwater. The title hit Denise like a physical force. Director Atwater, not the janitor, not the invisible woman. Director. As the board members filed out, Eleanor stopped beside her. You won't last 6 months, she said quietly. This isn't your world. You're right, Denise replied. It's not my world. But maybe that's exactly why things need to change. Eleanor left without another word. Michael Chen lingered. The fraud goes deep, he said quietly. Richard Brennan is involved, possibly others. Be careful who you trust. Why are you helping me? He smiled sadly. My grandmother came to this country speaking no English. She cleaned houses for 30 years while teaching herself the language, then taught herself accounting from library books. She died a janitor with a genius-level understanding of financial systems that no one ever knew about. I won't watch it happen again. After he left, Denise found herself alone in the boardroom, where she'd cleaned up after $1,000 lunches, where she'd been invisible while titans of industry decided the fate of millions. Now she had a seat at the table. Her phone buzzed. A text from her daughter. Mom, someone just sent me a video of you at your office. What's going on? Why are you wearing a suit? Before she could reply, another text from her son. Mom, you're trending on Twitter, #JanitorGenius. She looked up to find Jonathan standing in the doorway. So, Director Atwater, ready for your first official act, which is calling a meeting with the entire translation department. I believe you have an audit to conduct. They'll hate me. Probably. But they'll respect you, eventually. She stood straightening her suit. Mr. Kellerman. Jonathan, why did you really do this? And don't give me the corporate speak. He was quiet for a moment. My father was a janitor, he said finally. At IBM. Brilliant man, taught himself to code in the 70s when computers were the size of rooms. Tried for years to get them to notice to give him a chance. They never did. He died thinking he was a failure. He wasn't. No, he wasn't. And neither are you. He paused at the door. The translation team is waiting in conference room C. Try not to make too many of them cry. Denise walked through the halls of Halberg International, the same halls she'd walked for 13 years. But everything was different now. Employees who'd never noticed her were staring. Some with admiration, others with suspicion, many with a combination of both. Conference room C was packed. The entire translation department, 15 people who'd spent years building their careers on their linguistic abilities, sat waiting for the janitor who'd just been made their superior. She entered to dead silence. Richard Brennan sat at the far end, his arms crossed his face, a mask of barely contained rage. Lisa Chen looked curious. David Park seemed nervous. The others ranged from hostile to intrigued. "I know what you're thinking." Denise began standing at the head of the table where she'd once knelt to clean coffee stains. "Who does she think she is? How dare she come in here and—" "You're right," Richard interrupted. "How dare you? We've spent years creating a system that allowed $800 million in fraud to go undetected." The room went silent. "I've reviewed 3 contracts in the last 4 hours. All of them have the same systematic errors. Someone in this department, or multiple someones, has been deliberately mistranslating contracts to benefit our partners." "That's a lie." Richard stood, his face red. "Sit down, Richard." Her voice carried an authority that surprised everyone, including herself. "You translated Section 43 of the Yamamoto contract. You rendered exclusive rights as shared rights. You changed penalty of to bonus of. You reversed entire clauses. These aren't mistakes, they're crimes." Richard's face had gone from red to white. "You can't prove." "I can prove all of it, and I will. But right now, I'm giving everyone in this room a choice. Come forward now, help me understand the scope of this fraud, and I'll recommend leniency. Stay silent, and when I find what you've done, and I will find it, you'll face the full legal consequences." David Park raised his hand slowly. I found something strange in the Berlin contracts last year. When I brought it to Richard, he said it was above my pay grade." "It was a mistake," Richard snarled. "No." Lisa Chen spoke up. "I found similar issues with the Singapore deals. You told me the same thing." One by one, members of the department began speaking. A pattern emerged. Richard and 2 senior translators had been systematically altering contracts, likely taking kickbacks from the benefiting companies. The junior translators who'd noticed issues had been threatened, dismissed, or reassigned. Denise pulled out her phone and called security. "I need you to escort Richard Brennan and—" She looked at the 2 senior translators who'd gone pale, James Morrison and Patricia Hoffman, from the building. "Legal will want to speak with them." As security arrived, Richard stood. "You think you've won? You think they'll accept you? You're nothing but a janitor playing dress-up." "Maybe," Denise said calmly. "But I'm a janitor who speaks 9 languages and just uncovered the biggest fraud in this company's history. What does that make you?" He left without answering. The remaining team sat in shocked silence. Denise looked at each of them, seeing fear, uncertainty, but also something else, hope. "We're going to rebuild this department," she said, "from the ground up. And we're going to start by acknowledging something that should have been obvious. Language isn't just about words. It's about culture, context, understanding. How many of you have felt like your cultural knowledge was dismissed in favor of technical translation?" Every hand rose. "That changes now. David, you grew up in Seoul." "Yes, ma'am." "Don't call me ma'am, call me Denise. I want you leading the Korean market review. Lisa, you studied in Beijing for 3 years. 4 years. You're heading the Chinese audit. Everyone here has expertise beyond just translation. I want to know what it is. I want to use it." For the next 3 hours, she restructured the entire department. The hostile atmosphere gradually shifted to cautious optimism, then to genuine excitement as team members realized she actually valued their input, something Richard never had. As the meeting ended, Lisa lingered. "Can I ask you something? Why didn't you ever apply for a position in the department with your languages?" "I did," Denise said quietly. 7 times over the years. Richard rejected my application every time. Said I didn't have recent relevant experience. He knew, Lisa breathed. He knew what you could do and kept you out. He knew I'd catch what he was doing. That evening, as Denise finally prepared to leave her last task for the night, definitely not involving a mop, she found the service staff gathered in the lobby. Carlos, Maria, Tom, and 24 others who'd been invisible for so long. They applauded as she walked past. Not the polite corporate applause of the morning, but something deeper celebration mixed with hope, mixed with the possibility that maybe, just maybe, they wouldn't be invisible forever. "Don't forget us," Maria called out in Spanish. "Never," Denise replied in the same language. "This is just the beginning." As she stepped out onto the Manhattan street, her phone rang. Her daughter. "Mom, I saw everything. Why didn't you tell me you were still cleaning? Because I was proud of you, and I didn't want you to worry." "Proud, Mom? I'm proud of you. Do you have any idea what you just did? You didn't just get promoted. You changed everything." Denise looked back at the Halberg building, its windows reflecting the setting sun. Somewhere in there, other invisible people were pushing mops and emptying trash and carrying gifts no one had bothered to discover. "No, sweetheart," she said. "Not everything. Not yet." But as she walked toward the subway, she couldn't afford a taxi. Not until her first executive paycheck, she passed a coffee shop where the barista was speaking rapid Arabic on the phone. She passed a food truck where the owner was reading a book in Russian. She passed a dozen, 100, 1,000 invisible people with invisible talents. Tomorrow, she'd start the audit that would save Halberg International millions. Tomorrow, she'd begin rebuilding a department that had been corrupt for years. Tomorrow, she'd face Eleanor Craig's attempts to undermine her, the skepticism of executives who couldn't see past her janitor's past, the challenge of proving herself worthy of a title that should have been hers decades ago. But tonight, Denise Atwater, director. Denise Atwater went home to her small apartment in Queens, made herself a cup of tea, and pulled out a notebook she'd hidden in a drawer 13 years ago. Inside were ideas she'd had while mopping floors, innovations she'd imagined while cleaning bathrooms, solutions to problems she'd overheard but couldn't voice. She opened to a fresh page and began writing. Not in English, but in Japanese, then Mandarin, then Arabic, then Russian, a symphony of languages that had been silenced for too long. The world was about to learn what happened when invisible people became visible, when janitors' closets led to boardrooms, when someone finally asked the person pushing the mop what else they could do. At Halberg International, the executive floor lights stayed on late. Jonathan Kellerman sat in his office watching the city lights sparkle below, thinking about all the invisible people he'd walked past in his life. Tomorrow, he'd implement the new hiring initiative he'd been planning all day. Aptitude tests for all service staff education programs, a revolutionary promotion pathway that didn't require the right pedigree or connections. It would face resistance. The board would fight it. Eleanor would try to sabotage it. The old guard would claim it would destroy the company's culture. They were right about one thing: it would destroy the culture. The culture that let genius clean toilets. The culture that measured worth by diplomas on walls rather than knowledge in minds. The culture that kept people invisible because seeing them would mean acknowledging how much potential had been wasted. His phone buzzed. An email from Denise. First audit report attached. Found another $47 million in mistranslations. This is just from today. Richard was the tip of the iceberg. We need to talk about Hong Kong. He smiled. Director Denise Atwater had worked past midnight on her first day. Some habits apparently died hard, but she wasn't cleaning offices anymore. She was cleaning up corruption one contract at a time in 9 different languages. The janitor had become the executive. The invisible had become undeniable, and Halberg International, whether it was ready or not, would never be the same. The morning after her first day as director came too soon. Denise stood outside the Halberg building at 5:30 a.m., old habits pulling her there before the sun had even considered rising. But this time, she held an executive keycard instead of a mop bucket. This time, she entered through the main doors instead of the service entrance she'd used for 13 years. The security guard at the desk did a double take. It was Marcus who worked the early shift. He'd seen her video, heard about the promotion, but seeing her walk through those doors in a business suit still seemed to short-circuit his understanding of the world. "Morning, Marcus," she said, swiping her new keycard. "Director Atwater," he replied, and the title in his mouth sounded like a foreign language he was still learning to pronounce. The executive elevator whisked her to the 42nd floor in seconds, a journey that would have taken her 20 minutes through the service stairs. Her new office, she still couldn't quite believe she had an office, sat 3 doors down from Jonathan's corner suite. Her name was already on the door: Denise Atwater, Senior Director of International Relations. She traced the letters with her fingertip, half expecting them to smear like a mistake that needed cleaning. Inside, someone was waiting. Eleanor Craig sat behind Denise's new desk, her posture perfect, her expression carved from ice. "Ms. Craig," Denise said carefully, "you're here early." "I'm always here early. It's how you build an empire." Eleanor stood slowly, a calculated movement designed to emphasize her height advantage. "I've been looking through your findings from last night. 47 million in mistranslations. That's quite a claim." "It's not a claim. It's documented fact. I can show you." "Oh, I'm sure you can show me many things, but showing and proving are different beasts entirely." Eleanor moved around the desk, each step deliberate as a chess move. "You see, Richard Brennan called me last night. He has a different story. He says you manipulated those translations, that you created errors where none existed to make yourself look indispensable." Denise felt the familiar weight of being disbelieved, of having her truth questioned by someone with more power. But this time she had ammunition. "Then he won't mind if we bring in external auditors to verify my findings." Eleanor's smile was sharp as winter. "External auditors cost money. The board won't approve that expense based on the word of a—" She paused, letting the unfinished sentence hang like a weapon. "A janitor," Denise supplied. "I was going to say new director with no track record, but if the shoe fits." Before Denise could respond, her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Check your email. Now. M." She pulled up her email on her desktop, aware of Eleanor watching her every move. The message was from Michael Chen. The subject line read, "External audit approved." She opened it, her eyes widening. Michael had personally funded an external audit by Yamamoto's team. They would arrive in 3 hours to verify her findings. "It seems Mr. Chen has already approved the expense," Denise said, turning the monitor toward Eleanor. Eleanor's face went through several micro-expressions before settling on cold fury. "Michael Chen doesn't run this company." "No, but he owns 30% of it." Eleanor leaned forward close enough that Denise could smell her expensive perfume. "You think you've won something here. But this isn't a fairy tale. The real world doesn't reward janitors who get lucky. I've destroyed careers of people far more qualified than you. You're not even a speed bump." She straightened, smoothing her skirt. "Enjoy your office while you have it. I give you 3 weeks before you're begging to have your mop back." After Eleanor left, Denise sank into her chair in her office, and tried to stop her hands from shaking. The weight of what she'd taken on crashed over her. She wasn't just fighting for herself anymore. Every invisible person in the building was watching, hoping, believing she could change things. Her computer chimed. An instant message from Jonathan. "Staff meeting in conference room A. 5 minutes. Don't let Eleanor rattle you." Conference room A was the largest meeting space on the executive floor, usually reserved for board meetings and major client presentations. When Denise entered, she found it packed with the senior leadership team, 23 directors, vice presidents, and C-suite executives who ran Halberg's various divisions. The conversation died as she walked in. She recognized most of them from years of being invisible in their presence. There was Martin Hughes, CFO, who always left half-eaten sandwiches in his office for the janitors to clean up. Patricia Winters, head of legal, who'd once yelled at Denise for accidentally moving a document while dusting. David Kim, CTO, who'd never acknowledged her existence in 7 years of her cleaning his office. Jonathan stood at the head of the table. "Everyone, I'd like you to properly meet Denise Atwater, our new Senior Director of International Relations." The silence that followed could have been measured in heartbeats. Martin Hughes broke it first. "This is the janitor." "This is our director," Jonathan corrected firmly. "Who found 47 million in fraud last night?" added Michael Chen, entering the room with perfect timing. 47 million that our previous translation department missed, or rather, deliberately obscured. Patricia Winters straightened. "That's a serious allegation. Legal hasn't been informed." "You're being informed now," Denise said, finding her voice. She pulled up her findings on the main screen. Systematic mistranslation across 17 contracts over 3 years. Pattern indicates deliberate fraud, not errors. She walked them through her discoveries, switching languages as she showed the original texts versus the translations. Japanese to English, Mandarin to English, Arabic to English. Each revelation landed like a blow. David Kim was the first to really understand. Jesus Christ, if this is accurate, we've been hemorrhaging money for years. Not hemorrhaging, Denise corrected. We've been robbed, and someone in this room knew about it. The accusation hung in the air like a lit fuse. Several executives shifted uncomfortably. Martin Hughes had gone pale. "That's a dangerous claim to make," Patricia Winters said coldly. "It's a dangerous crime to commit," Denise replied. Her phone buzzed. The external auditors had arrived early. Within an hour, 3 Japanese forensic accountants were going through her findings with meticulous care. The executive team waited in tense silence, some hoping she was wrong, others hoping she was right, all knowing that either outcome would trigger an earthquake. At 8:47 a.m., Mr. Yamamoto himself entered the conference room. His face was grave. "Ms. Atwater's findings are accurate," he announced. "In fact, she has been conservative in her estimates. The actual fraud exceeds $70 million. Martin Hughes suddenly stood. I have a call with Hong Kong." "Sit down, Martin." Jonathan's voice could have frozen fire. "Nobody leaves this room." Security had already been called. They stood at the doors like sentinels. Patricia Winters cleared her throat. "As head of legal, I need to remind everyone that we should be careful about accusations." "Patricia," Denise interrupted. "Contract 447B with Seoul Industries. You signed off on this translation. The one that gave them exclusive rights to our entire Asian distribution network for 5 years instead of the limited partnership we thought we were agreeing to." Patricia's face went white. "That was reviewed by Richard's team and signed by you, without verification. Either you were incompetent or complicit. Which would you prefer to claim?" The room erupted. Accusations flew. Martin Hughes tried to run and was stopped by security. Patricia Winters demanded a lawyer. 3 other executives suddenly remembered urgent meetings they needed to attend. Through it all, Eleanor Craig sat perfectly still, a small smile playing at her lips. She was enjoying the chaos, filing away every weakness, every revelation, every opportunity to use this disaster to her advantage. "Enough!" Jonathan's voice cut through the noise. "Security escort Mr. Hughes and Ms. Winters to the legal department. The rest of you sit down. We have a company to salvage." As Martin and Patricia were led out, Denise noticed something others had missed. Eleanor and Martin had exchanged a look, just a flicker but enough. Eleanor was involved. Somehow, some way, she was part of this. The meeting continued for 3 more hours. Departments were restructured. Responsibilities were reshuffled. And through it all, Denise found herself at the center, her linguistic knowledge making her indispensable to untangling the web of international fraud. By lunch, she'd identified 12 more problematic contracts. By afternoon, The number had risen to 27. Each discovery felt like defusing a bomb, but also like painting a bigger target on her back. At 3 p.m., her daughter called. "Mom, there are reporters here at the hospital. They're asking about you." Denise's blood ran cold. "Don't talk to them. I'll handle it." She found Jonathan in his office on a conference call with the board. He muted it when he saw her face. "They're going after my daughter," she said. His expression hardened. "Eleanor." "Who else?" He unmuted the call. "Gentlemen, ladies, we have a situation. Someone has leaked Ms. Atwater's story to the press. I want our PR team on this immediately." Eleanor's voice came through the speaker, smooth as poison. "Perhaps if we'd handled this more discreetly, Jonathan." Promoting a janitor to senior leadership was bound to attract attention. "The attention isn't the problem," Denise said loudly enough for the board to hear. "The problem is someone weaponizing it against my family." "That's a serious accusation," William Foster's voice replied. "It's been a day of serious accusations," Denise shot back. "And so far, I've been right about all of them." By evening, the story had exploded across social media. #JanitorGenius was trending globally. News vans surrounded the Halberg building, and Denise's phone hadn't stopped ringing. She sat in her office as the sun set, the same sun she'd watched through windows she used to clean. The Hong Kong contracts were spread across her desk, each one a testament to millions stolen through linguistic manipulation. A knock at her door interrupted her thoughts. Lisa Chen entered, followed by David Park and 3 other members of the translation team. "We've been going through the archives," Lisa said. "It's worse than we thought. This goes back at least 7 years. David added, "And it's not just Richard. We found emails, coded messages. There's a whole network." Denise looked at the evidence they'd brought. Names she recognized, including several board members, including Eleanor Craig. "We could go to the FBI with this," Lisa suggested. "Not yet," Denise said. "First we document everything. Every contract, every email, every connection. We build a case so airtight that no amount of money or influence can break it." They worked through the night, 5 translators, and 1 former janitor, unraveling a conspiracy that reached into the highest levels of the company. At 2 a.m., they found the smoking gun, an email from Eleanor to Richard, dated 3 years ago, explicitly outlining the scheme. "We've got her," David breathed. "No," Denise corrected. "Now she's got nothing to lose, and that makes her dangerous." At 3 a.m., her phone rang. Her son. "Mom, there's someone at the apartment. They're trying to get in." Terror shot through her. "Call 911, now. Lock yourself in the bathroom." She ran to Jonathan's office where he was still working. "Someone's at my son's apartment." He didn't hesitate, grabbing his phone and calling his security chief. Within minutes, private security was racing to her son's location, while Denise waited every second an eternity. Finally, her son called back. "Security's here. Whoever it was ran off. Mom, what's going on?" "I'm making enemies," she said quietly. "Powerful ones." Jonathan looked at her. "You can back down. No one would blame you." "Would you, if it was your family?" "I'd burn the whole place down to protect them." "Then you understand why I can't stop." The next morning, Denise arrived to find her office destroyed. Her computer smashed, her files scattered and painted on the wall in red, "Know Your Place." Security footage had mysteriously corrupted. The night guard had seen nothing. But Denise knew. This had Eleanor's fingerprints all over it. She stood in the wreckage of her office, remembering all the executive suites she'd cleaned after hostile takeovers, after firings, after corporate casualties. She'd always wondered what it felt like to be on the other side of that destruction. Now she knew. Jonathan arrived, took one look at the scene, and pulled out his phone. "I'm calling the FBI." "No." Denise picked up a photograph from the floor, her family, the frame cracked, but the image intact. "This is exactly what she wants, to make me react emotionally, to make mistakes." "Then what do you want to do?" Denise smiled, and it wasn't a pleasant expression. "I want to call a board meeting, Full board, including shareholders. You can't call a board meeting. You're not. But Michael Chen can, and he will when he sees what I found last night. Within 2 hours, the boardroom was filled. Every board member, major shareholders, legal counsel, and at Denise's insistence, representatives from the FBI's Financial Crimes Division. Eleanor entered last perfect as always, showing no sign of concern. "This is highly irregular," she said, taking her seat. "So is embezzlement," Denise replied, pulling up her evidence on the main screen. For the next hour, she laid out the entire conspiracy. Every doctored contract, every kickback, every stolen million. The room grew quieter with each revelation. Board members who'd been skeptical were now pale. Shareholders who'd been dismissive were now furious. But Eleanor remained calm, even amused. Finally, when Denise presented the email evidence, Eleanor laughed. "You think this proves anything? Emails can be faked. Contracts can be misinterpreted. You're a janitor who got lucky once, and now you're trying to extend your 15 minutes by destroying anyone who threatens you. Is that what you think this is about, fame? What else could it be? You've been invisible for 13 years, and now suddenly you matter. Of course you'd do anything to keep that." Denise walked to the window, looking out at the city below. "You know what I learned cleaning these offices for 13 years. I learned that visible people like you, think invisibility is the worst thing that can happen to someone. But you're wrong." She turned back to face the room. "The worst thing is when invisible people start to believe they deserve it. When they stop fighting. When they accept that their gifts don't matter because they don't come with the right pedigree." She pulled up one last document. "This is a recording from Richard Brennan's phone. He kept it for insurance. Against you, Eleanor." Eleanor's composure finally cracked. "That's impossible. He wouldn't—" Denise hit play. Eleanor's voice filled the room, clear and damning. "I don't care how you do it, Richard. Just make sure those contracts favor our partners. My offshore accounts are ready. 20% is yours as agreed." The room erupted. Board members shouted. FBI agents moved forward. Eleanor stood, her perfect facade finally shattering. "You think you've won?" she snarled at Denise. "You think this changes anything? There will always be people like me and people like you, and people like you will always end up cleaning up after people like me." "You're right," Denise said calmly. "I will always be cleaning up after you, but now I'm cleaning you out." Security and FBI agents escorted Eleanor away. Several other board members were also taken for questioning. The room slowly emptied until only Denise, Jonathan, and Michael Chen remained. "The board will need restructuring," Michael said. "I propose Denise Atwater for a board seat." That's unprecedented," Jonathan said. "She's been a director for 3 days. And in those 3 days, she's saved the company from bankruptcy and exposed the biggest internal fraud in corporate history." Michael turned to Denise. "What do you say?" Denise thought of her mop bucket abandoned in a supply closet 3 days ago. She thought of 13 years of invisibility, of skills wasted, of potential ignored. She thought of her daughter who'd called that morning to say how proud she was. She thought of her son who'd asked if this meant he could finally tell people what his mother really did for a living. And she thought of Carlos, Maria, Tom, and all the other invisible people still pushing mops and hoping for someone to see them. "I say yes, but on one condition." "Name it," Michael said. "We implement a company-wide assessment program. Every employee from janitor to CEO gets evaluated for hidden skills, and we create advancement paths that don't require traditional credentials." "That would revolutionize how we operate," Jonathan said. "Good," Denise replied. "It's time for a revolution." 3 months later, Halberg International's stock had risen 40%. The fraud investigation had recovered $38 million. And the company had launched the Hidden Talent Initiative, which had already promoted 12 service staff members to professional positions. Denise stood in her new office, larger now, befitting a board member, looking at a framed photo on her desk. It was from her janitor days taken by Carlos during a night shift. She was mopping the executive conference room, unaware of the camera, lost in thought. She kept it as a reminder, not of where she'd been, but of where so many still were. A knock interrupted her thoughts. A young woman entered wearing a janitor's uniform, clutching a folder. "Director Atwater, I'm Anna. I clean the third floor. I heard about the Hidden Talent program and I wanted to apply. I speak 5 languages and have a degree in engineering from Honduras, but it's not recognized here, so I've been cleaning for 4 years and—" "Anna," Denise interrupted gently. "You don't need to justify your worth to me. Sit down. Tell me what you can do." As Anna began to talk, her shoulders straightening, her voice growing stronger, Denise saw herself 3 months ago. But more importantly, she saw what Anna could become. The revolution had started with one voice, but it wouldn't end there. Every invisible person in the building, in every building, deserved to be seen. And Denise Atwater, former janitor, current board member, and perpetual revolutionary, would make sure they were. Her phone buzzed. A text from Jonathan. "Japanese delegation requesting you personally for the new merger talks. They said they only trust the janitor who became a genius." She smiled, texting back, "I was never the janitor who became a genius. I was always a genius who happened to be a janitor." The difference mattered. It was the difference between a fluke and a pattern, between one woman's success story and systemic change, between a fairy tale and a revolution. Outside her window, the city hummed with life. Somewhere out there, in offices and restaurants and hospitals, invisible people were doing invisible work with invisible talents. But change was coming. One voice, one recognition, one revolution at a time. The janitor had found her voice. Now it was time to help others find theirs. Anna had barely finished explaining her engineering background when the office door burst open. Sarah Mitchell stood there, her face flushed with exertion, and something else, fear. "Denise, we have a problem. The Tokyo merger, Yamamoto's pulling out." Denise's blood ran cold. The Tokyo merger was worth $2 billion. It would secure Halberg's position in the Asian market for the next decade. What happened? Someone sent them documents, fake documents showing you never graduated from Columbia, that your whole background is fabricated. Sarah's hands shook as she handed over the papers. "They're questioning everything, including your translations from 3 months ago." Anna started to stand, mumbling apologies about coming back later, but Denise caught her arm. "Stay. Watch what happens when they try to tear you down." She turned to Sarah. "Get Jonathan, get Michael Chen, and get me on a video call with Yamamoto in 15 minutes. 15 minutes. Denise, he's refusing all calls. Tell him the janitor needs to clean up one more mess. He'll take it." Sarah left, and Denise turned to her computer, her fingers flying across the keyboard. Anna watched mesmerized as Denise pulled up document after document, her Columbia transcripts, her UN translation certificates, even her daughter's medical records from 20 years ago. "Why do you have all this?" Anna asked. "Because I knew this day would come. Eleanor Craig is in federal custody, but she still has allies. People who can't stand that someone like me sits in their boardroom." She pulled up another screen, this one showing financial transfers. "And I've been tracking them." Jonathan burst in, followed by Michael Chen and, surprisingly, William Foster, the board chairman, who'd initially opposed her appointment. "The Tokyo deal," Jonathan began, "is salvageable," Denise interrupted. "But we need to act fast. William, I need you to admit something." The older man stiffened. "I don't know what you mean." 3 weeks ago, you had dinner with Patricia Winters. She's out on bail, and she gave you something. Documents about me. You had them verified, or so you thought." William's face went ashen. "How did you—" "Because I've been invisible for 13 years. People forget that invisible doesn't mean deaf or blind. Your assistant Jennifer, she's part of our Hidden Talent program now. She told me about your meetings." "You've been spying on board members," William sputtered. "I've been protecting myself. and the company. The documents Patricia gave you were forgeries created by a very expensive consultant named Marcus Webb. The same Marcus Webb who's been shorting Halberg stock for 6 months betting on our failure. Michael Chen's expression darkened. You have proof. Denise pulled up a complex financial chart. Every trade, every communication, every forged document. Marcus Webb isn't just trying to discredit me, he's trying to destroy Halberg so he can buy it for pennies on the dollar. And William, whether you knew it or not, you've been helping him. William sank into a chair. I didn't know. Patricia said she had evidence that you were a fraud, that protecting the company meant exposing you. And you believed her because you wanted to, Denise said quietly. Because a janitor on the board offended your sense of how things should be. The video call connected. Yamamoto's stern face appeared on screen, his expression cold as Arctic wind. Behind him sat his entire board, 12 Japanese executives who looked like they were attending a funeral. Mr. Yamamoto. Denise began in perfect Japanese, but he cut her off. Ms. Atwater, or whoever you really are, we cannot proceed with organizations built on deception. You're right, Denise replied, still in Japanese. Which is why you shouldn't proceed with Marcus Webb. Yamamoto's eyes narrowed. What does this have to do with Marcus Webb? Denise switched to screen share, displaying the evidence she'd compiled. Speaking rapidly in Japanese, she walked them through the conspiracy, the forged documents, the stock manipulation, Webb's plan to acquire both Halberg and eventually Yamamoto's company. This is the same man who approached your competitor, Sakura Corporation, last month. She continued. The deal that fell through mysteriously. That was Webb playing both sides. One of Yamamoto's board members leaned forward, whispering urgently. Yamamoto's expression shifted from anger to calculation. You can prove this. I can do better than that. Mr. Foster here is willing to testify about his involvement. Aren't you, William? All eyes turned to William Foster, who looked like he'd aged 10 years in 10 minutes. Yes, he said quietly. I'll testify. I let my prejudice cloud my judgment. I wanted her gone because she didn't fit my idea of what a board member should be. Yamamoto was quiet for a long moment, his face unreadable. Then he spoke in English deliberately so everyone could understand. Ms. Atwater, 3 months ago you saved us $800 million. Today you may have saved our entire company. The merger is still on with one condition. Name it. You personally oversee all translations and cultural consultations. Not your team. You. Agreed. The call ended, and the room exhaled collectively. But Denise wasn't celebrating. She turned to William Foster. You have 2 choices. Resign quietly and testify against Webb, or stay and support the changes this company needs. Real support, not the lip service you've been giving. You want me to stay. After what I did, I want you to learn, to change, to realize that talent comes in forms you don't recognize. She gestured to Anna, who'd been silent throughout the crisis. This is Anna. Engineering degree, speaks 5 languages, cleans your office twice a week. You've walked past her hundreds of times. Will you see her now, or will you need another crisis to open your eyes? William looked at Anna. Really looked at her for the first time. I apologize. To both of you. Apologies are words, Denise said. I need actions. Starting with your full support for expanding the Hidden Talent program. You have it. As the executives filed out, Anna remained staring at Denise with something approaching awe. How did you know about Webb, about everything? When you're invisible, you learn to watch everything, remember everything. Every conversation overheard, every document glimpsed, every pattern noticed. I've been building this picture for 3 months, waiting for them to make their move. Her phone rang. It was her daughter Amelia, and she sounded panicked. Mom, there's a man here at the hospital. He says he's from the SEC, asking questions about you, about our family's finances. He's scaring patients. Denise's jaw clenched. Webb was escalating, going after her family again. I'll handle it. Don't talk to him. She called building security. "There's a man impersonating an SEC agent at Johns Hopkins. Have him detained." Then she called her actual contact at the SEC. "Agent Martinez, Denise Atwater. Someone's impersonating one of your agents." 20 minutes later, Agent Martinez called back. "We have him. Marcus Webb himself with fake credentials. This is enough to arrest him for impersonation of a federal agent, but you know he'll make bail in hours." "I don't need hours. I need 10 minutes. Denise pulled up her secured files, the ones she'd been protecting with encryption software her son had taught her to use. Inside were records of every suspicious transaction, every connection between Webb Eleanor Craig and a dozen other corporate executives across multiple companies. It wasn't just about Halberg, it was a network of corporate manipulation worth billions. She sent it all to Agent Martinez, the FBI, and for good measure, the Wall Street Journal. Within an hour, Marcus Webb was being held without bail. Within 2 hours, 3 more companies announced internal investigations. Within 3 hours, Denise's phone was ringing off the hook with interview requests. She ignored them all. Instead, she walked down to the 3rd floor, to the janitorial staff break room. It was shift change, and a dozen invisible people sat around a battered table eating sandwiches they'd brought from home, because the executive cafeteria was off-limits to them. They all stood when she entered, habit born from years of deference. She gestured for them to sit. "I need your help," she said simply. Carlos laughed nervously. "The board member needs our help." "No, Denise needs your help, because Webb isn't the only one. This network of corruption, it's everywhere. And the only people who can expose it are the ones they never notice." Maria leaned forward. "What do you mean?" Denise pulled out a chair and sat with them just like she had for 13 years. "How many of you have overheard conversations you shouldn't have seen, documents left carelessly on desks, noticed patterns that seemed wrong but had no one to tell?" Every hand raised. "I want to create a network, not of spies, but of observers. People who notice when something's wrong and now have someone to tell. Someone who'll listen and act." Tom, from Mail Services, spoke up. "That's dangerous. We could lose our jobs." "You could. Or you could help me change not just this company, but corporate culture across America. The Hidden Talent Program is just the beginning. I want to create a foundation funded by the recovery from these fraud cases that provides education, advancement, and protection for invisible workers everywhere." "The Invisible Visible Foundation," Anna said softly from the doorway. She'd followed Denise down. "I want to help." One by one they agreed. The janitors, the mail clerks, the cafeteria workers, all the invisible people who kept the building running while being ignored by those who ran it. That evening, Denise stood before an emergency board meeting. The remaining board members, those not under investigation, sat in shocked silence as she presented her proposal. "We're not just restructuring Halberg," she said. "We're reimagining what a corporation can be. Every employee, regardless of position, gets assessed for skills. Every employee gets education opportunities. Every employee gets a voice." "That's idealistic nonsense," one member protested. "The hierarchy exists for a reason. Yes, to keep people like me mopping floors while people like Eleanor Craig steal millions." She pulled up productivity charts. Companies that have implemented similar programs show 30% increases in efficiency, 40% reduction in turnover, and 50% increase in innovation. Turns out when people feel valued, they perform better. "The shareholders will never approve this," another argued. Michael Chen stood. "This shareholder already has, and I've spoken to others. After today's revelations, after seeing what Denise has accomplished, they're ready for change." The vote was called. 8 in favor, 2 against, 1 abstention. As the board members left, Jonathan lingered. "You know, this is just the beginning of the fight. Other companies will see you as a threat. The old guard across corporate America will try to stop you. Let them try. I've been fighting while invisible for 13 years. Now that people can see me, it'll be easier." But as she returned to her office, she found it wasn't empty. A man sat in her chair facing the window. He turned slowly, and Denise recognized him from newspaper photos. Robert Steinberg, CEO of Steinberg Industries, one of the most powerful men in American business. "Ms. Atwater," he said smoothly, "we need to talk." "About what?" "About how you're disrupting the natural order. About how your little revolution ends here." "Is that a threat?" "It's a reality. You think Eleanor Craig and Marcus Webb were powerful? They were insects compared to what you're about to face. Every major corporation in America has someone like you, someone with talents we'd rather not acknowledge. If we let you succeed, if we let them believe they can rise, the entire system collapses." Denise moved to her desk calmly, pressing the record button on her phone. "The system deserves to collapse if it's built on wasting human potential." Spoken like someone who doesn't understand how the world really works. He stood straightening his $10,000 suit. "I'm offering you a choice. Stop this crusade, take a generous severance, say 10 million and disappear. Or face the combined resources of corporate America destroying everything you've built. You're offering me a bribe. I'm offering you survival." Denise thought of Anna, eager to prove herself, of Carlos and Maria and Tom daring to hope, of her daughter proud of her mother for the first time in years, of every invisible person in every building in every city waiting for someone to see them. "No." Steinberg's expression hardened. "Then you've chosen war." "I've chosen change. There's a difference." After he left, Denise sat in the gathering darkness, knowing she'd just painted a target on herself that made Eleanor Craig's attacks look like child's play. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "You're not alone. The Invisible Network." Similar messages followed. From Chicago, from Los Angeles, from Detroit. Janitors, clerks, assistants. Invisible people who'd heard about her story and were ready to stand up. She pulled up her computer and began typing a document that would change everything. A manifesto for the invisible workforce. A declaration of their worth, their rights, their potential. She wrote it in 9 languages because talent and dreams weren't limited to English speakers. At midnight, she posted it online. By morning, it had been shared 1,000,000 times. The revolution had begun, and it started with a mop bucket and a woman who refused to remain invisible. 3 weeks later, Denise stood in federal court testifying against Marcus Webb. The courtroom was packed with media, but also with janitors, food service workers, and mail clerks from buildings across New York. They'd taken the day off, losing wages they couldn't afford to lose, to witness one of their own standing up to power. Webb's lawyer, a sharp-suited man who'd never worked a day of manual labor in his life, approached the witness stand with practiced condescension. "Ms. Atwater, isn't it true that you've harbored resentment against successful executives for 13 years?" "I've harbored resentment against waste," Denise replied calmly. "The waste of human potential, the waste of skills, the waste that comes from arrogance and prejudice." "So you admit to resentment. Perhaps enough resentment to fabricate evidence." Denise looked him directly in the eye. "I speak 9 languages fluently. In every one of them, the word for truth sounds different, but it means the same thing. The evidence speaks for itself in any language you choose." "You were a janitor." "I was a janitor with a master's degree, fluency in 9 languages, and 13 years of watching people like your client destroy companies for profit. Being a janitor didn't make me less capable of recognizing fraud. It made me invisible enough to document it." The lawyer tried another approach. "You stand to gain significantly from Mr. Webb's conviction. The civil suit could net you millions. Every penny of which will go to the Invisible Visible Foundation, as stated in the legal filing you apparently didn't read. Or perhaps you did read it but assumed someone like me wouldn't follow through." In the gallery, someone started clapping. Then another. The judge banged his gavel, but the damage was done. The invisible had made themselves heard. Webb was convicted on all counts. As he was led away, he passed Denise and hissed, "This isn't over. Steinberg and the others will destroy you." "They'll try," she agreed, But I've been destroyed before. Lost my husband, almost lost my daughter, lost my dreams. I survived all of it. I can survive them. Outside the courthouse, reporters surrounded her, but she pushed past them to where her real audience waited, the invisible workers who'd come to support her. This isn't my victory, she told them. It's ours. Every one of you who's been overlooked, undervalued, ignored, this is proof that we matter. Carlos stepped forward. Denise, I got promoted yesterday. They tested my languages and found out I speak 4. I'm joining the international facilities team. Maria added, They discovered I have a chemistry degree from Mexico. I'm starting in the lab next week. One by one, they shared their stories. The Hidden Talent program had spread to 3 other companies. The Invisible Visible Foundation had received donations totaling $50 million. Change was spreading like wildfire. But that night alone in her apartment, Denise received a call that chilled her to the bone. Ms. Atwater. The voice was unfamiliar, scared. This is Jennifer William Foster's assistant. Mr. Foster is dead. They're saying it's a heart attack, but he was trying to tell me something before he died. He said, tell Denise they know about Chicago. Denise's blood ran cold. Chicago was where she'd hidden the master files, the complete evidence of the corruption network. Only 3 people knew about it herself, William and Michael Chen. She immediately called Michael. No answer. Racing to her computer, she found news breaking Michael Chen's private jet had gone down over the Pacific. No survivors. Her phone rang again. Robert Steinberg. 2 accidents in one night, he said smoothly. Tragic. Makes you think about your own mortality, doesn't it? About your children's mortality. If you touch my family, I don't need to touch anyone. Accidents happen. Heart attacks, plane crashes, car accidents. The world is dangerous for people who don't know their place. The line went dead. Denise sat in the darkness, knowing she'd just been declared war upon by forces that had toppled governments, destroyed economies, and crushed anyone who threatened their power. But she thought of William Foster trying to redeem himself in his final weeks, of Michael Chen, who'd risked everything to support her, of the thousands of invisible people now daring to hope. She pulled out a burner phone she'd bought weeks ago, paranoid but prepared. She dialed a number she'd memorized. New York Times. This is Denise Atwater. I have a story that will bring down half of corporate America. But first, I need protection for my family. Within hours, her children were in federal protection. Within days, she was testifying before Congress. Within weeks, the story exploded across every major news outlet, a network of corporate executives manipulating markets, destroying companies, and maintaining their power by keeping millions of talented workers invisible and voiceless. Steinberg was arrested at his country club, dragged away in handcuffs, while his peers watched in horror. Dozens of executives followed. The old guard fell like dominoes, each revelation exposing another layer of corruption. But the real victory came 6 months later, when the Invisible Labor Rights Act passed Congress. Every company in America would be required to assess and develop all employees, regardless of position. The Hidden Talent program became federal law. Denise stood in the Oval Office watching the president sign the bill. Behind her stood Anna, now head of engineering at Halberg. Carlos managing international facilities across 3 continents. Maria leading a research team that had just patented a new cleaning compound she'd developed years ago, but never had the platform to present. Ms. Atwater, the president said, you've changed America. No, Denise corrected. I just made America see what was always there. That evening, she returned to Halberg International one last time. The building was different now. The executive elevator was gone, replaced by lifts everyone could use. The executive cafeteria had been opened to all employees. The rigid hierarchy that had kept people in their places for decades had crumbled. She found herself in the supply closet where she'd kept her mop bucket for 13 years. It was still there, forgotten in a corner. She picked it up, feeling its familiar weight. Some people are born to push mops, a voice said behind her. She turned to find Eleanor Craig out on bail looking gaunt and defeated. "And some people are born to steal millions," Denise replied. "But birth doesn't determine worth. You destroyed everything." "I revealed everything. There's a difference." Eleanor laughed bitterly. "You think you've won. You think this changes human nature. There will always be people on top and people on bottom." "Maybe. But now the people on bottom know they can rise, and the people on top know they can fall." Eleanor left without another word, but Denise remained holding the mop bucket that had been her constant companion through years of invisibility. She thought about throwing it away, but instead she carried it to her office, her former office, as she'd resigned from the board that morning to run the foundation full-time. She placed the bucket on the mahogany desk, a monument to every invisible person who'd ever been told they didn't matter. Then she pulled out her phone and called her daughter. "Mom, how did the signing go?" "It went perfectly. How's your day?" "Exhausting. You know what, I had a patient's parent today, a janitor at the hospital. She told me she's starting medical school next year because of you. Because of what you proved was possible." Denise smiled, tears streaming down her face. "That's the point, sweetheart. That was always the point." As she left the building for the last time, as an employee, she passed the night shift arriving. But now they walked differently, heads high, shoulders straight, visible and valued. They nodded to her with respect, not deference. The janitor, who spoke 9 languages, had become a legend. But more importantly, she'd become proof that legends could come from anywhere, even from someone pushing a mop at midnight, dreaming in 9 languages of a world where talent didn't need a dress code. The revolution wasn't complete, might never be complete, but it had begun. And it had started with 3 simple words that echoed through corporate America and beyond: "I speak 9." The morning after leaving Halberg International for the last time, Denise woke to find federal agents at her door. Not to arrest her, but to protect her. The death threats had started arriving at midnight, precisely timed with the announcement that she would be testifying before the Supreme Court about corporate discrimination practices. "Ms. Atwater." "Agent Martinez," said the same agent who'd helped her with Webb's case. "We've intercepted communications. There's a coordinated effort to stop your testimony." From whom? Though she already suspected the answer. "The Brotherhood of Commerce. Have you heard of them?" Denise's blood chilled. Everyone in business knew the rumors, a shadow organization of the world's most powerful executives, the puppet masters who decided which companies lived or died. But they were supposed to be a myth, a conspiracy theory whispered about in bars after too many drinks. "They're real?" she asked. "Very real. And very unhappy about the changes you've sparked." Martinez handed her a folder. "This was intercepted last night." Inside was a single page with 5 words: "The janitor dies on Tuesday." It was Monday. Denise's hands didn't shake. 13 years of carrying industrial cleaning supplies had given her steady hands, but her mind raced. "My children. Already in protective custody. We moved them an hour ago." Her phone rang. Jonathan Kellerman, his voice tight with panic. "Denise, get out of there. Now. They've—" The line went dead. She tried calling back. Nothing. "We need to move," Martinez said urgently, but Denise was already at her computer, pulling up the encrypted files she'd scattered across a dozen secure servers. If they were coming for her, she'd make sure the evidence survived. 5 minutes, she said. "We don't have—" The lights went out. In the darkness, Denise heard something that made her stomach drop: footsteps in the hallway outside her apartment. Multiple sets moving with military precision. Martinez drew his weapon. "Back exit, now." They moved through the darkness, Denise clutching her laptop. Behind them, her apartment door exploded inward. Voices shouted commands in multiple languages. Languages Denise recognized. Russian, Mandarin, Arabic. The Brotherhood wasn't just American. It was global. They burst into the stairwell, racing downward. 20 floors to the street. Behind them, boots thundered on metal stairs. Martinez spoke rapidly into his radio, calling for backup that might not arrive in time. 15th floor, 10th, 5th. The stairwell door on the third floor burst open. More operatives flooded in, cutting off their escape. Martinez raised his weapon, but Denise grabbed his arm. "Wait," she said in perfect Russian. "I have something your employers want." The lead operative, face hidden behind tactical gear, responded in the same language. "You have nothing but a death sentence. I have the Chicago files, the complete records of every Brotherhood transaction for the past 20 years. She held up her laptop. "Kill me, and they upload automatically to every major news outlet in the world." The operative hesitated. In that moment of uncertainty, the federal backup arrived. The stairwell erupted in chaos, shouting gunfire, smoke grenades. Martinez pulled Denise behind a concrete pillar as bullets sparked off metal railings. Through the smoke, she saw him, Robert Steinberg himself, standing calmly in the doorway, like he was watching a board meeting rather than a firefight. "Ms. Atwater," he called out, his voice carrying despite the chaos. "You've caused quite a disruption." "Just getting started," she shouted back. "No, I think you're finished." He held up his phone, showing a video feed. Her son's apartment. Men in suits standing outside his door. "One word from me and your boy has an accident." Denise's rage burned cold. "You touch him, and I'll destroy everything you've ever built." "With what? Some financial records." "Please. We own judges, senators, presidents. You're an ant declaring war on giants." But Denise smiled, the expression that made Steinberg step back. "Not just financial records. Everything. Every conversation, every deal, every murder you've covered up as an accident. William Foster was wearing a wire when he died. It transmitted everything to my servers." Steinberg's composed mask finally cracked. "Impossible. Page 47 of your Brotherhood Charter. Terminal actions require unanimous consent. William recorded the vote. Your voice is on it, Steinberg, along with 47 others." The firefight had stopped. Everyone was listening now. Federal agents, Brotherhood operatives, all frozen by the implications of what she'd just revealed. "You're bluffing," Steinberg said, but uncertainty colored his voice. Denise pulled out her phone, typed a quick command. Seconds later, Steinberg's phone buzzed. Then another operative's. Then another. She'd sent them each a sample, their own voices discussing murders like they were discussing quarterly reports. "Stand down," Steinberg ordered his men, his face gray. "Everyone stand down." In the sudden silence, sirens wailed closer. More federal agents, local police, media vans already arriving because Denise had live-streamed everything from her laptop. "You've destroyed yourself," Steinberg told her. "The Brotherhood has resources you can't imagine. We'll bury you in legal battles, destroy your reputation, make you disappear. Like you made Michael Chen disappear." Denise stepped forward, and armed federal agents moved with her. "Except Michael isn't dead. The plane crash was staged. He's been in witness protection for 3 months, documenting everything." This was the twist that broke Steinberg completely. His phone rang, his lawyer, no doubt seeing the live stream and panicking. Then it rang again, and again. The Brotherhood was turning on itself, each member trying to save themselves from the collapse Denise had engineered. Within an hour, the apartment building was surrounded by every federal agency with an acronym. Within 3 hours, arrests were being made across the country. The Brotherhood of Commerce, the shadow organization that had controlled American business for 70 years, crumbled in a single morning. But Denise knew this was far from over. As she was escorted to a secure vehicle, her phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. "The American Brotherhood has fallen. The Global Council remains. You've won a battle, not the war." She was taken to a federal courthouse, not as a defendant, but as the star witness in what would become the largest corporate conspiracy trial in history. The courtroom was packed beyond capacity. Outside, thousands of workers, janitors, clerks, assistants, held signs reading "Visible" and "We Matter." The prosecutor, a sharp woman named Catherine Walsh, approached the witness stand. "Ms. Atwater, can you explain to the court how you uncovered this conspiracy?" Denise looked at the gallery, at the faces of the powerful men and women who'd tried to destroy her, then at the workers who'd supported her. "I listened," she said simply. "For 13 years, I was invisible in their offices, their boardrooms, their private clubs. They spoke freely around me because to them, I didn't exist. They discussed crimes like I discussed grocery lists, never imagining that the woman mopping their floors understood every word in every language they spoke. Can you give us an example?" Denise turned to look directly at Steinberg, who sat at the defendant's table. March 15th, 3 years ago. Mr. Steinberg was in his office with Theodore Marshall, discussing the elimination of a rival CEO. The phrase he used was permanent solution. He said it in German, thinking his American colleagues wouldn't understand. But I understood. I was cleaning his office, and I recorded it on my phone. The courtroom erupted. The judge banged his gavel repeatedly. "You recorded private conversations." Steinberg's lawyer jumped up. "That's illegal." "Not in New York," Catherine Walsh responded smoothly. "One-party consent state. Ms. Atwater was lawfully present as an employee, making her a party to any conversation she could hear." But the real bombshell came when Denise revealed her next piece of evidence. "Your Honor, I request permission to present Exhibit 74A, the Brotherhood's membership list." The judge nodded. On the courtroom screens, names appeared. CEOs, senators, judges, even 3 Supreme Court justices. The gallery gasped. Reporters typed frantically, and several defendants looked physically ill. "This list," Denise continued, "was hidden in a document labeled Cleaning Supply Inventory. They never imagined someone like me would understand the code." Over the next 6 hours, Denise laid out the entire conspiracy. Companies destroyed to benefit Brotherhood members. Politicians bought and sold. Rivals eliminated through accidents that weren't accidental at all. She spoke in English, then switched to Mandarin to read intercepted Chinese communications, then Arabic for Middle Eastern connections, moving through languages like a conductor, directing a symphony of revelation. During a recess, Anna found her in the witness waiting room. She wasn't alone. Dozens of Halberg employees, both executive and service staff, had come to support her. "They're calling you the woman who brought down American capitalism," Anna said. "I didn't bring down capitalism. I exposed the criminals who corrupted it." Denise looked at the group. "The system isn't broken because hierarchy exists. It's broken because the hierarchy is based on prejudice, not potential." When court resumed, Steinberg's lawyer made one last desperate play. "Ms. Atwater, isn't it true that you've accepted a position as CEO of a new company? That all of this has been about advancing your own career?" Denise stood, something witnesses weren't supposed to do, but the judge didn't stop her. "Yes, I've accepted a position. CEO of Visible Industries, a company funded by recovered Brotherhood assets dedicated to identifying and developing overlooked talent worldwide. We've already hired 300 former janitors, food service workers, and clerks who speak multiple languages, have advanced degrees, or possess skills their previous employers never bothered to discover." She looked at the gallery, at the cameras broadcasting to the world. "Every person the Brotherhood dismissed as insignificant will have a chance to prove their worth. Every invisible worker will have a path to visibility. That's not advancing my career. That's advancing humanity." The verdict came back in 3 days. Guilty on all counts. Steinberg was sentenced to life in prison. The Brotherhood's assets totaling over $3 trillion were seized. That evening, Denise stood in the new offices of Visible Industries. The building was different from typical corporate headquarters. The executive floor didn't exist. All offices were on the same level. All bathrooms were shared. All spaces were accessible to everyone. Jonathan Kellerman had joined as COO, bringing half of Halberg's best talent with him. Anna ran the engineering division. Carlos managed global operations. Maria led research and development. The invisible had become the visible, and they were building something revolutionary. "We have a problem," Jonathan said, entering her office without knocking. Another new rule: no closed doors except for private conversations. What kind of problem? The good kind. We've received over 3 million applications in the past week. Invisible workers from every country, every industry. We can't possibly evaluate them all. Denise smiled. Yes, we can. We're going to build an AI system that identifies potential regardless of resume format, education credentials, or work history. We'll call it the potential recognition algorithm. That could revolutionize hiring globally. That's the point. Her phone rang. Her daughter Amelia. Mom, you're not going to believe this. The hospital just announced they're implementing a hidden talent program. They're testing all support staff for medical knowledge. 3 janitors have already been admitted to nursing programs. It's spreading, Denise said softly, like wildfire. Mom, you didn't just change business, you changed the world. After the call, Denise walked through the offices. It was past midnight, but people were still working, not because they had to, but because they wanted to. They believed in what they were building. She found herself in the kitchen, not an executive kitchen, just a kitchen where Tom from Halberg's mailroom was teaching Portuguese to a group of new hires. In the conference room, a former McDonald's cashier who spoke 7 languages was leading a strategy session on expanding into South American markets. This was what victory looked like, not her testimony, not the convictions, but this. People discovering they were more than their job titles, more than their uniforms, more than what others saw when they looked at them. A security alert flashed on her phone. Someone had breached the building's perimeter. She called security, but the line was dead. The lights flickered, then stabilized. In the reflection of the window, she saw him, a man in an expensive suit standing behind her. Ms. Atwater, he said in accented English. Korean she recognized. The Global Council sends its regards. She turned slowly. The man was young, perhaps 30, with the kind of forgettable face that could disappear in any crowd. Let me guess, she said. You're here to threaten me, my family, my company. No, I'm here to offer you a position. That wasn't what she'd expected. A position. The Brotherhood was American, outdated, clumsy. The Global Council is different. We recognize talent wherever it exists. You've proven your worth. Join us, and you'll have resources beyond imagination. Refuse and... He shrugged elegantly. And you'll destroy everything I've built. Oh no, we'll let you continue. But every success you have will be because we allow it. Every victory will be hollow, because you'll know we could end it whenever we choose. You'll be our pet project, proof that we're progressive while we maintain control of everything that matters. It was a different kind of threat, more insidious than violence. They wouldn't destroy her, they'd own her. I need time to consider, she said. 24 hours, then we need an answer. He left as quietly as he'd arrived. Denise stood alone in the darkness, knowing she'd just been offered a devil's bargain. Join them and betray everything she'd fought for, or refuse, and wonder every day when they'd decide she'd outlived her usefulness. But then she remembered something William Foster had said before he died. The only power they have is the power we give them by believing they're invincible. She pulled out her phone and sent a message to every invisible worker in her network, now numbering in the millions. The Global Council has made contact. Time for Phase 2. Within an hour, responses flooded in from janitors in Tokyo, clerks in London, food service workers in Mumbai. The invisible network she'd built wasn't just American, it was worldwide. And, unlike the Brotherhood or the Global Council, it wasn't about controlling from the top. It was about rising from the bottom. The next morning, she called a press conference. Media from around the world gathered expecting her to announce Visible Industries' expansion. Instead, she stood at the podium and said 5 words that sent shockwaves through the global economy. The Global Council contacted me. She laid out their offer, their threat, their assumption that she would either submit or be controlled. Then she revealed what they didn't know, that their own employees, the invisible workers in their own buildings, had been documenting everything for months. Every CEO in the Global Council has invisible workers in their offices, janitors who speak multiple languages, assistants with advanced degrees, security guards with military intelligence training. They've been watching, listening, recording, and now they're ready to speak. On cue, live streams began appearing online. Workers in Shanghai, London, Tokyo, Dubai, all revealing conversations they'd overheard, documents they'd seen, crimes they'd witnessed. The Global Council, like the Brotherhood before, it had been brought down by the people they'd never bothered to see. But the Korean operative had been right about one thing. This wasn't the end. As one shadow organization fell, another would rise. The powerful would always seek to control the powerless, unless the powerless refused to be powerless anymore. That night, Denise stood before the United Nations General Assembly, the first janitor ever to address the world body. For too long, she said, speaking in English, then repeating in each of the 6 official UN languages. We've accepted that some people matter more than others, that a CEO's voice carries more weight than a cleaner's, that visibility is earned through pedigree, not potential. She paused, looking at the assembly of world leaders, many of whom had their own invisible workers cleaning their offices, serving their food, guarding their doors. I stand here today not as a former janitor who became successful despite her circumstances, but as a woman who was always valuable, always talented, always worthy of being seen. The only thing that changed was that someone finally looked. The assembly was silent, but around the world, millions of invisible workers were listening. Today, I announce the creation of the International Visibility Accord. Any nation that signs commits to evaluating and developing all workers regardless of their current position. Any corporation that joins pledges to promote based on potential, not pedigree. This isn't about destroying hierarchy, it's about ensuring the hierarchy is based on merit, not prejudice. By the end of her speech, 17 nations had committed to signing. Within a week, that number had grown to 43. Within a month, over 100. The revolution that had started with a mop bucket in Manhattan had gone global. But in her hotel room that night, Denise received one final message. You've won this round. But power doesn't disappear, it evolves. We'll be watching. The new order. She deleted the message without fear. Let them watch. Let them see what happened when the invisible became visible, when the unheard found their voices, when the overlooked stood up and demanded to be seen. She video called her children, both safe and proud. Mom. Her son said, my engineering firm just announced they're testing all support staff for technical skills. The janitor who cleans my floor, turns out he has a degree in mechanical engineering from Syria. The revolution continues, Denise said softly. Is it really a revolution? Amelia asked. Or is it just the world finally becoming what it should have been all along? Denise thought about that question as she looked out at the New York skyline. Somewhere out there in offices and hospitals and schools, invisible people were pushing mops and emptying trash and dreaming in multiple languages of a world where their talents would be recognized. Tomorrow, she'd return to visible industries and continue building that world. Tomorrow, she'd face new threats from old power structures, desperate to maintain control. Tomorrow, the fight would continue. But tonight, she stood at the window and whispered in 9 languages the phrase that had become a rallying cry for invisible workers worldwide. We are here. We matter. See us. The message about the new order haunted Denise's dreams that night, but she woke to something far more immediate, her own face on every news channel with a headline that made her blood freeze. Denise Atwater, secret billionaire who played janitor. She grabbed her phone, finding hundreds of messages. Jonathan called first, his voice urgent. Denise, someone's leaked documents. They're saying you were never really poor, that your whole story is fabricated. That's impossible. My history is documented. They have bank records showing offshore accounts in your name dating back 15 years. Photos of you at elite European schools. A marriage certificate to a Swiss banker who died under mysterious circumstances. Denise's mind raced. This was sophisticated, a complete identity fabrication that would have taken months to create. The new order hadn't wasted any time. Jonathan, none of that is real. You know me. You've seen my real records. I know. But the media doesn't care about real anymore. They care about the story. And right now the story is that you're a fraud. Within hours, everything she'd built began to crumble. Visible Industries' stock plummeted. 3 nations withdrew from the International Visibility Accord. Employees started questioning whether their revolutionary leader was just another rich manipulator playing games with the working class. Denise arrived at Visible Industries to find protesters outside. Not the supportive workers who'd cheered her for months, but angry people who felt betrayed. Signs read, "Fake Janitor," and "Rich Liar," and worse. Anna met her at the entrance, tears in her eyes. "Denise, please tell me it's not true." It's not. Every document they're showing is forged. But they have photos. Deep fakes. AI generated. Anna, you've known me for months. Have I ever lied to you? Anna wanted to believe Denise could see it. But doubt had been planted, and doubt was like a cancer in trust. Inside the office was in chaos. Half the employees were defending her, the other half demanding answers. Carlos stood on a desk trying to maintain order, but his voice was lost in the shouting. "Enough!" Denise's voice cut through the noise like a blade. Everyone turned to her. "Conference room! All senior staff! Now!" In the conference room, she faced her leadership team, people she'd elevated from invisibility, people who owed their current positions to her vision. But gratitude and doubt were warring on their faces. "They're saying you have $100 million hidden in Switzerland," Tom said quietly. "They're saying your husband was murdered for his money," Maria added. "They're saying you've been playing us all," David Park finished. Denise pulled up her laptop, her fingers flying across the keyboard. "What they're not saying is, who benefits from destroying me? Watch." She projected financial records onto the screen, not hers but the new orders. Money trails leading from shell companies to media outlets, to the protest organizers outside, to the digital forensics experts who'd created the fake documents. "This attack cost approximately $50 million to orchestrate," she said. "That's not some random vendetta. That's an organization with resources trying to destroy what we've built." "But how do we know these documents are real and theirs are fake?" someone asked. Before Denise could answer, the door burst open. Federal agents flooded in, weapons drawn. "Denise Atwater, you're under arrest for fraud, money laundering, and conspiracy to commit murder." As they cuffed her, she saw it in some of her employees' eyes, relief. It was easier to believe she was a fraud than to believe the world could change. Easier to accept disappointment than to fight for hope. But Anna stepped forward. "Wait. I need 5 minutes with your evidence." The lead agent laughed. "Ma'am, please step back. I'm a forensic engineer. I can prove those documents are fake in 5 minutes, or you can arrest an innocent woman and face the lawsuit of the century." Something in Anna's voice made the agent pause. 5 minutes. Anna grabbed the nearest computer, pulling up the supposed evidence. Her fingers flew across the keyboard, running authentication protocols she'd developed for Visible Industries. "Here," she said, projecting her results. "The metadata on these photos shows they were created 3 days ago, not 15 years ago. The compression algorithms didn't exist until 2019. The bank documents use a font that wasn't developed until last year." The room held its breath. The federal agent examined the results, then spoke into his radio. After a tense moment, he uncuffed Denise. "Our apologies, Ms. Atwater. It seems we were given falsified evidence." As the agents left, Denise turned to her employees. Some looked ashamed, others defiant, but all were waiting for her to speak. "This won't be the last attack," she said. "They'll come at us with everything they have: lies, threats, violence. They'll try to divide us, to make us doubt each other, to make us forget why we started this revolution. The question is, will we let them?" "No," Anna said firmly. "No," Carlos echoed. One by one, every voice in the room joined the chorus. But Denise knew this was just the beginning. The new order had shown their hand they wouldn't fight fair, and they had resources she couldn't match. Her phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. Impressive recovery. Round 2 begins now. The lights went out. Emergency lighting kicked in, bathing everything in red. The building's security system began broadcasting an automated message. Evacuation required. Chemical leak detected. Evacuate immediately. People started rushing for the exits, but Denise grabbed the intercom. Stop. It's a fake. There's no chemical leak. This is another attack. But panic had already set in. In the chaos, she noticed something: several new employees, people she didn't recognize, moving against the flow of evacuation. They were heading toward the server room. Carlos, Tom, with me. She raced toward the servers, the heart of Visible Industries operations. All their data, all their employee records, all their evidence against the Global Council, and now the new order. It was all there. They arrived to find the new employees clearly operatives attempting to plant devices on the servers. Step away from the equipment, Denise commanded. One operative smiled. Or what, you'll hit us with your mop? No, she replied in perfect Russian, recognizing his accent. I'll do this. She pulled out her phone, activating a protocol she'd hoped never to use. Every screen in the building, every computer, every phone displayed the same message. Dead man's switch activated. Any attempt to destroy or steal data will result in automatic upload to every major news outlet worldwide. The operative's smile faded. You're bluffing. Try me. Your employers might survive the evidence being released, but you won't. Your name's photos and personal details are part of that upload. Every crime you've committed for them documented. It was a standoff that lasted 30 seconds, but felt like hours. Finally, the operatives backed away, disappearing into the evacuation chaos. As the lights came back on and employees returned, Denise realized something crucial: she couldn't keep playing defense. The new order would keep attacking until something succeeded. That night, she called a meeting with her most trusted allies, Jonathan, Anna, Carlos, Maria, Tom, and surprisingly, Michael Chen, who appeared via encrypted video from his safe house. We need to go on the offensive, Michael said. The new order thinks they're untouchable because they're even more shadowy than the Brotherhood was. But everyone has a weakness. What's theirs? Jonathan asked. Denise had been thinking about this. Their invisibility. They hide in shadows, operating through proxies. But what if we made them visible? How? The same way they tried to destroy me, but with truth instead of lies. Over the next 72 hours, Denise's network of invisible workers, now calling themselves the Visible Legion, launched the most comprehensive intelligence-gathering operation in corporate history. Janitors in Tokyo photographed documents left on desks. Assistants in London recorded conversations. Security guards in Dubai tracked late-night meetings. The picture that emerged was staggering. The new order wasn't just a criminal organization. It was a parallel government controlling economies, starting wars, deciding the fates of nations from conference rooms and private clubs. But they'd made one critical mistake. They'd kept the same vulnerable point the Brotherhood had. They treated their service workers as invisible. Denise stood in Visible Industries' war room, watching as information poured in from around the world. A janitor in Singapore had photographed a list of New Order members. A cook in Moscow had recorded a conversation about an planned economic attack on Brazil. A driver in Cairo had documented a meeting about manipulating oil prices. We have them, Anna breathed. We actually have them. Not yet, Denise corrected. Information without action is just data. We need to move simultaneously globally, or they'll scatter like roaches. She picked up her phone and made a call she never thought she'd make. Director Harrison. This is Denise Atwater. I have information about the largest criminal conspiracy in human history, and I need the CIA's help. Within hours, Visible Industries had become the unofficial headquarters of a joint task force involving agencies from 17 countries. The invisible workers who'd been gathering intelligence were now official assets in the largest sting operation ever attempted. But the new order had their own sources. As plans were being finalized, Denise received another message. "We have your daughter." Her blood turned to ice. She immediately called Amelia, but it went straight to voicemail. Hospital security confirmed she'd left her shift, but never made it to her car. A video arrived moments later. Amelia bound and gagged in a warehouse, a gun pressed to her temple. A disguised voice spoke. "Stand down or she dies. You have 1 hour." Every parent's nightmare. Every leader's impossible choice. Save her daughter, or save the revolution that could change the world. But Denise Atwater had spent 13 years being underestimated. She'd learned to think 7 steps ahead while mopping floors to plan contingencies while being invisible. "They want me to stand down," she told the room, "which means they're not ready for us to move." "Anna, how long until our operation launches?" 45 minutes. "Then we accelerate, launch in 15. "But your daughter?" "They won't kill her until the deadline. That's not how hostage situations work. They need her alive for leverage." Her voice was steady, but inside she was screaming. "And I know where she is." Everyone stared at her. She pulled up a map of New York. The video showed windows. Industrial windows with a specific manufacture date 1947 to 1952. The angle of sunlight indicates northwest exposure. The sound of planes every 4 minutes means proximity to LaGuardia flight path. There are only 3 warehouses in New York that match all criteria. She was already moving, grabbing car keys. "Launch the operation. I'm going after my daughter." Jonathan tried to stop her. "You can't go alone." "I'm not going alone." She looked at Carlos Maria. "Tom, Anna, her army of former invisible workers. I'm going with people who know how to be invisible when needed, and visible when it counts." They moved through the city like ghosts, using service entrances, maintenance tunnels, the invisible pathways that service workers knew but executives never noticed. By the time they reached the first warehouse, the global operation had launched. Around the world, police forces were raiding new order facilities. Media outlets were receiving massive document dumps. Financial systems were freezing criminal accounts. The new order's careful infrastructure was collapsing in real time. The first warehouse was empty. The second had been abandoned for years. At the third, Denise saw them, black SUVs, guards at entrances, the subtle signs of an occupied building. "How do we get in?" Tom whispered. Denise smiled grimly, pulling out a janitor's uniform from her bag. She'd kept one just in case. "The same way I've gotten into every building for 13 years, through the service entrance." They approached, pushing cleaning carts they'd borrowed from a nearby office building. The guards barely glanced at them. Invisible workers entering to clean up whatever mess the important people had made. Inside, they could hear voices from the upper floor. Denise recognized one, the Korean operative who'd first approached her. But now she heard his real voice without the careful modulation. American, Midwest accent. He'd been pretending to be foreign to throw her off. They climbed the stairs silently, years of working night shifts having taught them how to move without sound. At the landing, Denise peered around the corner. 5 operatives armed. And in the center, Amelia, terrified but unharmed. "The deadline's in 10 minutes, one operative said. "If Atwater doesn't call off the operation—" "She won't," the leader replied. "She's too smart. She knows we need the girl alive." "So what's the plan?" "We disappear. Regroup. The order has survived for centuries. We'll survive this too." Denise stepped into view. "No, you won't." Weapons swung toward her, but she raised her hands, showing a phone. "Dead man switch. I die and your locations, identities, and crimes broadcast to every agency currently hunting you." "You're bluffing again." "I already triggered the global operation despite having my daughter hostage." "You really think I'm bluffing?" The leader studied her. "What do you want?" "My daughter, and your complete surrender." He laughed. 5 armed operatives against 1 janitor. 4 janitors, actually, Carlos said, stepping into view with Maria and Tom. "And we're not just janitors." What happened next became legend in the invisible worker community. Anna had remotely hacked the building's systems, killing lights at the perfect moment. In the darkness, years of working in dimly lit offices gave the service workers an advantage. They knew how to navigate blind, how to move in spaces others couldn't see. When the lights returned, the operatives were on the ground, subdued by people they'd never have imagined could fight. Denise was untying Amelia, tears streaming down both their faces. "Mom," Amelia sobbed. I know, baby, I know." Police sirens approached. The operation leader, blood running from his nose where Maria had hit him with a mop handle, looked up at Denise with genuine bewilderment. "How? We had everything. Money, power, connections." "But you didn't have them," Denise said, gesturing to her team. "The people you never see, never count, never consider. That's always been your weakness. You build your empires on our backs, then forget we're holding you up." As police took the operatives away, Denise's phone rang. It was Director Harrison from the CIA. "Ms. Atwater, the operation is a success. 317 arrests across 42 countries. The new order is finished." But Denise knew better. The Brotherhood had fallen then, the Global Council now the new order. Something else would rise, some new configuration of power, trying to maintain the old hierarchies. Back at Visible Industries, the celebration was muted. Victory had come at too high a cost, had been too close to disaster. Employees looked at Denise differently now, not just as a leader, but as someone who'd risked her daughter's life for the cause. She addressed them honestly, as she always had. "Some of you think I was heartless risking Amelia. Others think I was heroic. The truth is, I was terrified. But I knew something the new order didn't, that every invisible person in this room would fight for my daughter like she was their own. Because that's what we are now. Family." Her phone buzzed with a message that made her smile. It was from a janitor in New Delhi. "We saw the news, starting our own Visible Industries branch. The revolution continues." Similar messages poured in from around the world. The movement had become bigger than one company, one country, one woman's story. It had become what Denise had always dreamed it could be: unstoppable. That night she sat with Amelia in her apartment, both of them safe, but changed. "Mom, were you really going to let them kill me to save the operation?" Denise pulled her daughter close. "No, baby, I was going to save both." "That's what we do. We find a way to win without losing ourselves." "The media is calling you the most powerful woman in the world." Denise laughed softly. "I'm not. The most powerful people in the world are still invisible, still cleaning offices and serving food and being overlooked. I'm just the one who reminded them that invisible doesn't mean powerless." Her phone rang. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer, exhausted by the day's events. But something made her pick up. "Ms. Atwater." The voice was old, refined, speaking English with an accent she couldn't place. "Congratulations on defeating the new order." "Who is this?" "Someone who's been watching for a very long time. The Brotherhood, the Global Council, the New Order, they were all recent constructs, amateur organizations playing at power." Denise's blood chilled. "And you represent?" "The Foundation. We've existed for 500 years, Ms. Atwater. We don't control through force or money. We control through something far more powerful: belief. The belief that some are born to lead and others to serve. You're challenging that belief. That makes you interesting. Interesting enough to threaten. Oh no, interesting enough to invite. You see, the Foundation only accepts those who've proven they can change the world. You've done that. Join us, and you'll have the power to make your revolution permanent. Refuse, and well, beliefs are hard to change. Your movement might last a generation, maybe two. But without the Foundation's support, the old ways will return. You're offering me membership in the very thing I'm fighting against. We're offering you the chance to change us from within, to be the voice for the invisible at the highest table. Think about it, Ms. Atwater. Real, lasting change, or a brief flicker of hope that dies with you." The line went dead. Denise stood at her window looking out at the city lights, each one representing thousands of invisible workers going about their invisible lives. 500 years. An organization that had survived kingdoms falling empires, rising the Industrial Revolution, the digital age. How did you fight something that ancient, that entrenched? But then she thought of Anna, brilliant and brave. Carlos, who'd stood by her from the beginning. Maria, who'd never given up hope. Tom, who'd risked everything for change. The millions of invisible workers worldwide who'd finally found their voices. She picked up her phone and sent a message to her network. They think we're a moment. Let's show them we're a movement. Within minutes, responses flooded in. From Tokyo, we stand with you. From London, visible forever. From Cairo, Mumbai, Sao Paulo, 1,000 cities, we are here. The foundation had made the same mistake as all the others. They thought she was the revolution, but she wasn't. She was just the woman who'd reminded the invisible that they had always had power. They just needed to use it. Tomorrow the foundation would expect her answer. Tomorrow they'd learn what happened when you offered a devil's bargain to someone who'd already been through hell. But tonight, she held her daughter close and whispered in 9 languages the truth that no shadowy organization could ever defeat. We are no longer invisible. We will never be invisible again. The revolution that had started with a mop bucket in Manhattan had become something the Foundation, in all its 500 years, had never encountered a revolution that didn't need leaders, because everyone was a leader, didn't need structure, because it was everywhere, didn't need power, because it was power. The janitor had spoken 9 languages, but the language that mattered most was the one every invisible worker understood, the language of being seen, valued, and recognized for who they truly were. That language would echo through history long after the foundation crumbled, long after Denise Atwater's name was forgotten, long after the last shadowy organization fell. Because revolutions led by the invisible didn't end when their leaders disappeared. They ended when there was no one left to overlook, no talent left to waste, no brilliance left to hide. They ended when everyone was visible.